All right, good morning, everybody. And it's good to see you all. Welcome to those that are watching online. My name is Chris Singh. I'm the Economic Development Director for the Washington County Community Development Agency, and it's great to be here today and have a chance to introduce the panel to talk about some of the things that are happening in the East Metro. And I'm going to start with Bruce Sayler, and then I'll ask Bruce to introduce himself, and then Rachel Juba from the City of Hugo, and then Dan Undem from the City of Forest Lake. And then if you just want to go ahead and start giving us an update on what you're seeing and working on in your communities and your organization, that would be wonderful. So Bruce, if you want to go ahead and get started, that would be wonderful.
And I'm Bruce Sayler. I'm the Principal for Community and Economic Development with Connexus Energy. Short term, Christine Costello is going to be replacing me, so we're excited about that.
Rachel?
I am Rachel Juba. I'm the Community Development Director with the City of Hugo. I have been with the city for almost 17 years and held various planning positions in the City of Hugo and have been the Community Development Director for at least 4 years.
Dan?
I'm Dan Undem. I'm the Assistant City Administrator with the City of Forest Lake. I've been with the city, I think, going on 8 years now, and held a variety of positions there now with the city, and now work as the Assistant City Administrator.
Great, thanks everybody. Bruce, we're going to start with you and talk a little bit about the Minnesota Technology Corridor. And this is a concept that started about 5 years ago between two counties, so Anoka County and Washington County, 5 cities. We've got Forest Lake and Hugo in Washington County. We've got Columbus, Lino Lakes, and Centerville in Anoka County. And then a number of different private utility providers, including Connexus Energy, Zayo, Comcast, a number of different fiber providers that serve the area, and talk about the concept and how it works. But this is the first time in this area that we've ever gotten together with our utility providers and the 2 counties and 5 cities to say we could be working together, and how do we do that? Check your competition at the door. This is not who gets the next customer or who gets the next business in your community. This is how do we work together to try to promote this corridor for technology-related businesses. And so, Bruce, if you want to talk a little bit about the technology corridor, and we've got a little video of that to show you as well. But go ahead, Bruce, I'll let you introduce the concept.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And like Chris mentioned, this was a great collaborative effort that started about 5 years ago with the 5 different cities, 2 counties, and we couldn't be happier with what's going on with everybody. It's nice when you can sit in a room that you don't have all the cities arguing with each other, you don't have 2 utilities arguing with each other and things like that. We all realized from the get-go 5 years ago that what was good for one city or utility is good for everybody in that region. So we were pretty excited about that. And I know Chris really talked about some of the high points on the tech corridor, but maybe if we could show that video, it really kind of encapsulates what this concept is all about. This is why we wanted you to do it, not us. So that video was put together about 5 years ago, but it really it continues to hold all of that that we put together. And I think in addition to this, we can really talk about, you know, workforce, because I know workforce is hitting everybody in the same way. And I know Chris has been working with the Forest Lake High School. We're working with the tech colleges to get that labor pool getting ready to move forward. So we're really excited about that tech corridor. It took a while to get it off the ground, you know, 5 years ago, and then unfortunately COVID hit and things slowed down. But I can tell you things right now are really ramping up with inquiries. Each month we're getting more and more inquiries out of state from large developers looking at that tech corridor because of the availability and a lot of the streamlining that the cities have put together as far as the permitting process. As many of you are aware, it's speed to market. It's, you know, how can you work with the city to turn this permit around in a reasonable amount of time, because it's money to them. So we're excited with what Hugo and the city of Forest Lake has put together, making that happen. And one of the wins that we just recently got in the city of Centerville is the first major project. It's the Amazon delivery station. Not a large building, it's more commercial, about 140,000 square feet. But they plan on hiring up to 600 employees. They're going to have over 300 electric vehicles once everything is up and operated. And construction's underway right now. They plan on opening the facility in August of 2023, so they're already tipping up panels as we speak. And from Connexus Energy perspective, this is the largest electric load for us in over 10 years. And it's all off-peak load, which means those vehicles are going to be charged in the evening hours, which is great for the electric grid. It's great for our members. So it's really a good win for us, but it's a good win for the community looking at the infrastructure that's been put in place moving forward. And again, as I mentioned, we get reports every month from Golden Shovel, who manages this website, and we're just seeing a great increase in the amount of interest in this site. It's not tire kickers anymore. They're really serious about it. We're putting together RFIs for that information. So we're excited that the tech corridor is really starting to take off now, and we're excited what we're going to see next year.
Thanks, Bruce. And we talked a little bit about Amazon, but we're also interested in working with data centers or technology businesses, anybody that needs to move large volumes of data, because it's an incredible amount of capacity that runs right up I-35 in terms of the fiber capability that we can serve with utilities, being able to serve those companies that need a lot of fiber, a lot of power, and that want to move pretty quickly. And I'll maybe just ask Dan and Rachel to weigh in and talk a little bit about how you've prepared in your communities to work with the corridor.
Thanks, Chris. I just want to add one thing. Bruce and Chris are being really modest about how they created the technology corridor and brought everybody together. I mean, it was Bruce and Chris working with Chris's counterpart in Anoka County to kind of decide how are we going to bring everybody together in a partnership. And maybe Bruce, you can talk a little bit more about how they can find properties that are available in the technology corridor. Dan and I will talk a little bit about our properties, but we're partnering with Anoka County and Lino Lakes and Centerville. And so we have a really good website that maybe you'd want to highlight a little bit.
Sure, on the Minnesota Technology website, we do have premier sites that it's available. You can just click on that. You can download a PDF on the different sites, but really the contact information with the cities themselves, because that changes over time. Each month there could be a different piece of property that's available, but we do have premier sites available, which each city identifies, you know, as we move forward. And we're seeing a lot of hits on those too.
Okay, I can start with giving just a little bit of background on the city of Hugo. I do have a slideshow that maybe we can pull up here. I hope everybody knows where Hugo is. A lot of people have said, where's Hugo before, about 15, 20 years ago, but we're in the northeast area of Washington County, between White Bear Lake and Forest Lake, and just east of Anoka County and Lino Lakes. Yep. So you're on the last slide there, so if you can scoot up just to the first slide, I'll start. All right, so thanks for having the city of Hugo here. We're excited to just talk about what the city of Hugo is all about and our development opportunities and what's happening in Hugo. You can go to the next slide. So Hugo is just over 16,000 in population. Over the last 20 years, we've more than doubled our population. We're just a fast growing community. A lot of commercial and industrial, but really a lot of residential development coming through. Some townhome and single family. We have about 60% single family and 40% townhomes. The median the median income is about 92,000, and we're an urban and rural living community. So the western portion of our property is served by city sewer and water. That's where our industrial parks are. That's where the city is developing, and about half of that to the east is rural and agricultural. So we do have a lot of different characteristics in the city of Hugo. We're 15 miles from downtown St. Paul and 20 miles from downtown Minneapolis. So in regards to the Minnesota Technology Corridor, we do have a piece of property that's located on Highway 61 and south of 165th Street. These properties now do have city sewer and water. Last year when I was here, they did not. And so these are properties that have been available and are listed on the Technology Corridor website for sale. This includes a couple different property owners that have stated that they are interested in being part of some sort of project. It's 75 acres, zoned industrial, and it does have robust fiber capacity. It also has excellent power capacity and reliability. This is on the edge of an area that's served by Excel and Connexus, so that you can have some dual connection points if needed. Some examples of what's going on in Hugo. So we have two industrial parks. We have a Pelican Industrial Park, which is an older industrial park, and then the Bald Eagle Industrial Park. They both are serviced by rail. In fact, we have a team track on the rail that's is operated by Minnesota Commercial, and we have a public easement. So any business in the community can actually use the rail, even if you don't have direct access to it. We also have sites available in both of our industrial parks, and we also have a flexible business park zoning district. So it's kind of our catch-all zoning district. It includes office warehouse, it can include industrial, general industrial, theaters, restaurants. So we want to be really open in these areas where we know that we can accommodate several different uses. The population within the 10-mile radius is about 222,000. And we also see a lot of business expansion in the city of Hugo, and I'll talk about those on my next slide. JL Schwieters and Schwieters Companies have a large campus within the city of Hugo. They have probably 500,000 square feet, if not more than that, and they just continue expanding. I even got a call from another broker that they're looking for another site, and they're just a growing business. They build roof trusses and floor trusses and also do in-work cabinetry. And so, as you can imagine, with the housing that's going right now, I know that it's slowed down a little bit. They've been really busy. So they just did a 45,000 square foot building right next to their existing campus. And Excel Energy is also expanding on site. Right now they have their linemen and lineman training program in the city of Hugo, and they also own a 60,000 square foot building. And they just got approval of an expansion for the training center, and they're going to be installing another 50,000 square foot building on site. So kind of bringing all of their training into one site into the city of Hugo, and that'll bring about 600 new people to the facility for training on an annual basis. The White Bear Lake School District, if you remember, passed a referendum about 2 years ago. It was the largest in the state, 365 million. And they built an elementary school about 100,000 square feet in the city of Hugo to accommodate the growth in the city. They already had 2 other elementary schools in the city. And they also built a transportation facility in one of our industrial parks to accommodate the transportation. There's another industrial use that opened up. It's Eagles Landing. It's 3 new buildings. It's kind of this man cave or collector car type building, and I know that they do have some space available, and that's about 30,000 square feet between the buildings. I'll talk a little bit about our residential growth in the next slide. So the projects that have been approved in the city of Hugo that are new projects are Meadows at 90 units, and that's Centra Homes. The Shores of Onika Lake, which is on the west side of Onika Lake in the city of Hugo, is 100 units or 200 units, and that is MI Homes. And then Jack Pine Place Apartments, which is really an interesting concept. It's just something that I haven't seen come across my desk, or as I'm looking at Finance and Commerce or any other journal that I see. It is an 84 units in apartments, but we call them garden apartments, and they are 7 different buildings with 12 units in each building, and they all have separate access points and a garage space. So it's a little bit of a different concept. So instead of these large apartment complexes, they're breaking them up into a couple different buildings, and it's been really successful in the city of Hugo and something that our city council has been pretty proud of. We'd like to see more of those concepts in the city as we move forward with apartments. There's other phases of existing residential projects that are including another 150 lots available in the city. So a little bit about our philosophy in regards to business resources and how we run as a community. Our City Council and Planning Commission has directed staff to get projects through the process quickly and efficiently. We also have low tax rates. We just lowered our tax rate 3% with our new budget that was just adopted on Monday. We do not have park dedication fees for commercial and industrial development. We do not require trunk sewer charges for redevelopment projects in the cities, and there's several opportunities for that. We do have an economic development assessment policy. So if there's some money that we can finance for you up front for a public project, we would consider that. And then we also have another business resources for new entrepreneurs in the community or even in the county, which would be the Washington County Open to Business Program. And you can find more information on that on the Washington County CDA's website. And then my contact information is just on the last slide, and I'll let Dan talk about Forest Lake.
All right. Thanks. My name is Dan Undem. I'm the Assistant City Administrator with the City of Forest Lake. I as well have a PowerPoint presentation, but I do not have a fancy video, so sorry to disappoint if you guys are looking for another video. I'm here today to talk a little bit of the market update, the City of Forest Lake, and give you a little bit of the behind the scenes of some of the work that we've been working on at a staff level to really help prepare the city for development and redevelopment. We could just start on the second slide. Yep. For those of you that don't know where Forest Lake is, we're just north of the 35E, 35W split. We have easy access to both downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul. From a city standpoint, we're 36 square miles. We have 4 lakes within our community, and we're just north of 21,000 residents. And we have right around 1,200 acres of parkland. And while we don't have a partridge in a pear tree, we do have a municipal airport. So that's just Forest Lake a little bit by the numbers. Some recent projects that we've had completed or are currently under construction in the city of Forest Lake. We have Bridge Academy Daycare. This is, when completed, will have approximately 150 kid capacity. We'll serve 150 kids on a daily basis. So we have a new large daycare facility being constructed. We have Sweet Living, which is an assisted living and memory care units that's being constructed in our headwaters area of the city. We have Fitzgerald's Flat Apartments, which is a 53-unit apartment complex. And then we also have Timber Ridge 2, which is recently opened, and that's a 2 53-unit buildings on the city's western side. As a note, we are seeing a slight slowdown in residential development and requests for subdivisions. We're not 100% sure if that's driven by market conditions. As we all know, residential is kind of in this sort of ether. We don't know if it's slowing down because of interest rates. But one thing that we are working on within the city is we are looking at updating our MXR1 zoning code requirements, which affects minimum lot sizes for subdivisions. So we don't know if developers are holding their subdivision requests back until those new requirements are in place. Those are looking to come back or get approved, I believe, in early 23. So while we're seeing that slowdown, we're still trying to make our best estimated guess as to why that slowdown is. But we are seeing a slight slowdown in residential development right now. Two areas of the city that I really want to focus on today is our downtown area and our headwaters area. And as I go into the market update for these two areas, one thing that I'll kind of talk about are some of the studies that we've been doing as a city. One thing that we've done within the city is started taking a look at where are the data gaps within our city. We're sort of, I like to attempt to have conversations with Chris. Forest Lake, I think, is sometimes on the edge of good data sets. We're sort of a little far out from the metro, so some of those good data sets that exist inside metro communities are a little bit harder to find out in Forest Lake. So we look at where are those gaps in our data, and we try to fill those out by doing the study work. So, you know, when a developer comes in and asks us specific questions about demographics or land use, et cetera, we can provide that information to them. So if we go to the next slide. So our downtown Forest Lake, this area really is, in my opinion, really prime for redevelopment. We've done a lot of study work on our downtown area as of late. One thing that we did recently do is we recently completed a downtown plan, which sets the bold vision for what our downtown will become. I'll get into that in a little bit later here in the presentation. But on top of our downtown plan, we've also completed numerous retail studies for our downtown, or for our city and our downtown area. One thing we looked at was, what is a city's retail trade district or retail trade area? Where are residents or shoppers coming from, you know, to spend money within the city of Forest Lake? We had one of these done, I believe it was in late 2012, 13, around that time frame. And that study showed good pull data. So we are pulling a lot of residents or a lot of shoppers in from not just within our borders, but from outside of our borders as well. So we looked at that. We had that study updated and completed in late 2019. And that 2019 study, again, reiterated the fact that Forest Lake pulls a lot of retail sales in from surrounding areas. So from a retail perspective, we have a strong pull data, particularly in restaurants and bars, as well as miscellaneous retail. We punch way above our weight class in those two areas there. So we have a strong retail environment for the city. Also, one thing that we did look at for our downtown market in particular is that we actually worked with the Humphrey Institute to do a gap analysis, take a look at what's the existing retail or what the existing commercial spaces are in downtown. And based on, you know, data sets, where are some of the gaps? There's some businesses that would potentially do well in that area. So if you're looking at doing a multi-use or a mixed-use building and looking to lease out that commercial component, what potentially, based on market research, would be a good fit? We do have a gap analysis performed for our downtown, specifically our downtown marketplace. As is in the news all over city municipal infrastructure, we all know in some cities that's, you know, decaying and needs to be updated. So as we started to prepare our downtown for redevelopment, we wanted to make sure our infrastructure could support that redevelopment. We didn't want a developer to come in, break ground on the site, realize, oh, by the way, the sewer or water system can't support this development, and we have a larger project that's attached to this. Our infrastructure study on our sewer capacity has come back. Our infrastructure is in good shape, and it can handle that redevelopment. So we have that poison pill that could potentially come up down the road. We've looked at it. We don't anticipate any issues with our current sewer capacity. And we also just recently completed a stormwater study for our downtown area. A lot of our downtown right now is impervious from corner to corner on the lot. So if you do a redevelopment, how do we handle updated stormwater requirements? So we're looking at, is there areas that we could do offsite storage of that stormwater? What can we do from a creative solutions for stormwater management as redevelopment happens? So we just completed that study and are now looking at how do we fund those improvements or the recommended policies as a result of that study. So we've done a lot of studies in our downtown to really make that prime for redevelopment. And right now I want to go just a little bit into our downtown plan. The downtown plan for Forest Lake really does set a bold vision for where we want to go as a city. If you had asked me 3 years ago, what do we want our downtown to be? I really couldn't give you a definitive answer. Now we have a plan for our downtown. It sets where we want to go, what we want to become. The planning process took approximately 18 months for us to do. We started in the middle of COVID, so we did this sort of in-person and remote. But at the end of the day, The community feedback we got on our downtown plan, the community engagement we got, blew my expectations away. I've been working in community engagement for a lot of years, and the level of community engagement, the number of people that came to meetings was way beyond what I anticipated when we first started the project. So we have a very well thought out, a lot of community input went into the development of this plan. And one thing with this plan is, while it sets the roadmap where we want to go, we intentionally made it flexible. We didn't want to say parcel A is going to redevelop as this, parcel B is going to be this, parcel C is going to be this. We wanted to make it flexible to allow for the market to respond to it, to realize that, we understand the markets are always shifting and they're dynamic, and we wanted our plan to be dynamic as well. So while we know where we want to go, there's multiple pathways for us to get there based on how projects sequence and how projects come about. But a couple of the high points in that, within the plan, we're looking to improve the walkability of our downtown. Right now, our downtown area within Forest Lake is Highway 61 going right through the middle of it. It's not exactly the most inviting area to walk. I mean, you can walk through it, but you have cars speeding by you. So we're looking at doing some streetscape improvements as part of this plan to soften that, to make that more of an inviting and walkable community, but also improving the connectedness of downtown to the surrounding area, to the surrounding neighborhoods. So how do we connect back into those existing neighborhoods that are adjacent to downtown? How do we connect back to the trail system that runs north to south through our downtown, as well as just better connections with downtown to the rest of the community? As you can see, it's kind of hard to tell, but that top left corner of the picture that's up there, that's actually Forest Lake. The downtown Forest Lake borders the lake, and we have a large park that's on the shores of Forest Lake. So we have this fantastic natural resources in our downtown. The plan also focuses, how do we better utilize that resource? How can we get that resource to be more focused or more used, as an amenity for the city? So we have plans for better use of that lake as well. And then in every city I've ever worked in, the number one issue I hear is parking. So within our plan, we're looking at options for addressing our parking issues in downtown. We have a couple options for how do we address the current shortfalls in parking, and as the redevelopment happens, how do we anticipate those parking needs moving forward? And then finally, as part of our plan, we have an activation strategy. And what's unique about this is that we're looking at how do we program our downtown, how do we program that space to bring residents, to bring visitors into downtown, give them something to come to so they want to come back. And our activation strategy just does not include summertime activation. We know it's pretty easy to program in Minnesota in the middle of summer when it's a gorgeous day, a little bit more challenging in the middle of January when it's 25 below and it's snowing, but we are looking at year-round activation. What can we do to bring people to downtown on a year-round basis? So our downtown plan was just approved last July, so this is extremely fresh. If you're interested in seeing it, it's on the city's EDA website, which is investinforestlake.com. Feel free to check it out. If you have any questions on it, reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on the downtown plan. The second area I want to focus on today is our headwaters area, which is the area outlined here in blue. Full disclosure, I am not a cartographer, so this is my feeble attempt at making a map. So the actual boundaries of headwaters is going to look a little bit different than this, but this will at least give you a general idea of where it is in the city. This area, again, has a lot of potential here from a development and development standpoint. One particular area, in particular in headwaters, is the city's headwaters 123-acre site. Just on the next slide. This is city-owned. And as mentioned with the technology corridor, this is the city's premier site within the technology corridor. It is on this drone shot, it's the farmland there on the right-hand side of the picture. That is a portion of the 123 acres. To help prepare this site for development, we've done some pre-work on this. We've completed a phase 1 environmental on the site. We've also completed a wetland delineation. And then also realizing that maybe not all projects need 123 acres for their site. We're looking at doing some concept platting on this. And I just saw the first draft of the concept plats yesterday afternoon. And our planner has done a fantastic job of looking at this site and looking at ways this possibly could be subdivided out for smaller sites. One thing that he did a good job of doing is really using this particular parcel's existing natural buffers and natural features when he developed those concept plans. So we do have some platting that will at least provide some options based on the reality of the situation on the ground with this particular parcel for how this could potentially redevelop. So again, we're in that market space for the large contiguous tracts of land, but we're also looking at how do we possibly position this for subdivision if we're seeing market requests for smaller parcels, area. And this parcel is also zoned right now for business park. So we're looking at taking this parcel here, and the long-term vision for this is to make this a job center for the city. So we're trying to convert this over to a job center. So that is a long-term vision here for this Headwaters parcel. And speaking of jobs, we are working as a city on workforce development as well. Again, I think this is something that's probably not typically in city government's wheelhouse. This is a new ask of city government, sort of how do we assist in workforce development. So what we've done here is we started to serve as a conduit. We've realized that we don't have the resources to really set up a brand new workforce support programs. So we're working as a conduit between businesses and these existing programs that are in place. One of those programs is the school district's career launch program. This is back when I was in high school called Work Study. It's basically an updated version of that, where when I was in high school, I got out of school early to go to work. This is the same thing, but this is like that program times 100. They actually go into technical jobs, manufacturing, construction, healthcare. They'll job shadow, they'll get on the job training. Some of the employers that are active in the career launch program are using it to develop their career, their talent pipeline moving forward. So they'll have high school kids come in, job shadow for a couple of years, realize that in order to work in that position, they need a technical degree. They'll say, go back, get your technical degree. When you graduate, you have a job. So the employers are extremely happy with the results they're seeing for that pipeline of recruitment. One thing that we're also doing is we're going to be working with the county on a labor shed study. It's one thing for me to say, you know, Forest Lake, we're great at recruiting, but my word is my word, right? So people typically make $1 million investments on data. So we're trying to get some data behind that to prove that to prove out what is the labor shed for Forest Lake and Northern Washington County. So when we say I need, 500 manufacturing positions filled, can we do that? The labor shed study will give us that data that's there. Well, we don't have it now. We're looking to fill that gap with Washington County here. I believe in early 23, we'll start that project. And then I have on here the size up small business data. This is more geared towards small businesses. And again, this is run by Washington County. But the reason why this is here is small businesses have probably typically lacked in having pretty good analytical data or access to those data sets. This size up small business allows small business to go in and do a lot of market research on their own. So when they're developing business plans, there's solid data sets behind it. So it's a pretty exciting and robust tool for small businesses who are looking for workforce, for kind of market conditions, for competition, for potential customers. If you go into that small business data website, it's pretty mind-blowing the analytics you can pull out of there. So that's pretty much a market update on the city of Forest Lake. My last slide here is basically just showing that winter activation of the lake. It is possible to use a lake in the middle of winter. I believe it's in February, March, we have a polar plunge out there, or it's not called a polar plunge, it's a rotary plunge. So we enjoy that lake year round out there. So again, that's the market update from the city of Forest Lake.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Rachel. Really good information, a lot going on in both cities and a lot of opportunities. So I'd encourage you to reach out to both Dan and Rachel. They'll be around for the day here today, but certainly afterwards, if you want, we'll leave your contact information with you. They can reach out as well and talk about opportunities. I'm sure they'd be both really interested in talking about what's going on and what they might be able to do to help you with your projects. And so I want to ask you a couple of questions. We had a prep meeting last week, and one of the things that Bruce shared with me absolutely shocked me. And Bruce, I'm going to ask you a question. What issues are you seeing in your industry that could impact the development projects that you're seeing happening or working on?
Sure. I think probably the biggest thing for you, not just Connexus, but any utilities, is the supply chain. We've really seen that change over the last couple of years. For example, transformer lead times. We used to be able to order transformers, and we used to be able to get them delivered within 12 to 16 weeks. That is now over 60 plus weeks to get that same transformer. So Lead times are out there. We're dealing with it. We're trying to find ways around it that we can make that happen. Another example, we had an existing supplier for transformers. They put us on an allocation basis, which basically they're saying you're only going to get so many in a year. So we were forced to go out and find additional suppliers, which you have to vet them. You have to make sure that they go through all the UL standards and everything else. So it's just taking time for our procurement department to really be able to get those moving forward. We've also changed some of our procedures. For example, residential construction, if we had a plat, we would, before curb and gutter went in, we'd want to make sure we got the transformers and the wires in there, pads, everything good to go. And then whenever they built, everything was there, and hookup was going to be really quick. Now we're doing the same thing without the transformer. We've got the lines in there, we've got the pads in there, but we're waiting on the transformer until that house is actually going up. Then we're going to put it in. So we're kind of moving things around as much as we possibly can. And probably one of the biggest change for us is our overhead wire has gone from 8-week lead time to over 70-week lead time to get that same wire. So our planning department is really planning. They're really looking at what do they need to do down the road. An example, they're already ordering supplies for 2024 projects, which it's kind of the cart in front of the horse, but you really don't know what's going on. So another thing, our overhead wire, like I said, 8 weeks to 70 weeks is just really playing into that whole thing. So I guess our message, not just from Connexus Energy, but any electric utility, is get the utility involved as soon as you possibly can, because they need to plan that out. And we'll try to find that transformer where we can, but the more information we can get up front as soon as that contract is signed, let us know, and we'll just make sure that your client can take that project over right away.
Just one other thing to add to that. You did an excellent job, and I think that's really good information. I know that we've gotten information from Connexus and Xcel Energy on the lead times for those particular items, but when we're talking to developers, whether it's a commercial or industrial development or a residential developer, it's labor and costs. That's the other thing. So Xcel Energy has asked to work on Sundays in developments to get all the stuff completed, and we have to give people a break, so we can't really give them, you have to give the neighborhood people that live in there a break a little bit, so we got to give them time to not have work going on. But the same things are happening for developers to the cities as well. So we have a street reconstruction CIP, and with all of the costs going up and everything almost doubling, we have to go back to our CIP and kind of recalibrate our budget in order to do those street reconstruction projects. And so we feel, the cities feel it just like the developers do, and so we understand that the labor and cost is also a factor for projects moving forward.
Rachel, along that same line, what can developers do to work with the cities to help streamline process, and how long typically does it take for a project from start to finish for both your and Dan's communities?
Right. So, one of the things that our city council in particular strives for is that they want to get the development through the process quickly and efficiently. They don't want the project sitting on the table unless there's some real problem. And so we typically try to get you through within a 60-day review process. One example that we have, back in 2012, Xcel Energy had to spend money or get approval by the end of the year, and they had applied with us at the middle of November. And so we streamlined their process to get them through the planning commission and city council and got them approved within 45 days. So we try to do that, but one of the things that they did is they hired good engineers and a good development team good architects to move forward. And so having those professionals that are doing these projects all the time really does make a difference as you're going through the city system. You kind of get what you pay for. So do a lot of research on who's doing your engineering and architecture as they're working with communities, because that does make a difference on how they can streamline the process with the city to help you move forward.
Dan, same question, anything you want to add?
Yeah, and I'm going to probably give the answer that nobody wants to hear. It depends, and I think the reason why I say it depends is that the devil's always in the details, but the more details that we know on the front end, the better we can plan for what that approval process is going to look like. If we're kind of coming in with the back of the napkin sketch, kind of trying to figure out, will this work, will this won't work, there's a lot of details that are missing in there that'll get developed later on. So my advice is, in echo with what Rachel said, is come with as much detail as you can. The more you can have your plans done, the more that we'll know, the more that we can give you assurances or an estimate on what those approval processes are. We are working internally, with staff to really streamline those approval processes, to take a look at what are the steps, when should we sequence those steps, what's needed, what's not needed. I know we're taking, small things like fence permits, which doesn't probably impact this room that much, but previously that may have been a 10-step process, and now we're looking at probably reducing it down to 3 or 4. So trying to get rid of some of those duplications, some of those things that possibly cause delay, so we can be more efficient with that. But for me to sit here and kind of say it's an X amount of day window, it's probably a little bit unfair. And I also don't want to give the best rosy case scenario if it's a 30-day approval when it's reality. That's maybe a one-off that we had, but I would say it depends. But again, the more details you can bring to those first meetings, the more that you're willing to make that upfront investment into your project, the more we can give you assurances on the approval side on the back end.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dan. And also, for controversial projects, so if you're a heavy industrial user and you're going into a community, don't underestimate the neighboring properties and what they're going to say. And so if you can help on the front end, reducing the impacts and kind of thinking about what's happening to the neighboring properties, that's also something that will help your project move forward.
Thank you.
If I could just, on that controversial side for controversial projects, one thing that we found too is that if you can bring data into that controversy early on, where it's actual numbers or it's actual, here's what it's actually going to look like, is helpful in terms of trying to sell it to the community or trying to sell it to the neighborhoods. An example I have is, I mentioned in my presentation that we have a municipal airport. We get residents that call in all the time and saying, well, there's flights in there every, that. And I'm like, well, our data actually shows that we have average 1 or 2 takeoff and landings a day throughout the course of the year. Now there's data that's more frequent than that, but once I start showing them the numbers, they're like, oh, I guess it's not as accurate as I thought it was. But if you don't have those numbers that kind of show that, or kind of show what the actual impacts are going to be, emotion can take over, and then you're trying to put that genie back in the bottle, which can be difficult.
Great, thank you. I'll start with Rachel on another question, and then Dan, feel free to weigh in as well. What are the most effective tools that your communities are using to support development?
Yeah, so I would say for our Economic Development Authority is probably taking care of our existing businesses, so they can share with their counterparts or people who they work with that we're a good community to work in. We did a business retention and expansion study not too long ago, and found some of the needs that our community had and our business community had, and so we formed groups to accommodate the items for those businesses. There were some blighted buildings in our downtown that got torn down, which we thought were sacred to the business community, and come to find out they didn't want to look at those anymore, and we would have not known that if we didn't do that study. And so and also some of the business resources that they need, and then partnering with Washington County on some of those business resources in regards to workforce and labor force and how all that plays together. And so one of the biggest questions that we asked the businesses, like, why do you stay in the city of Hugo? Why do you want to be here? And we do believe that we're a good place to do business. And we do have a great leadership on our city council that has been pretty stable over the last 20 years. And I think they have been treated well. And so that is the reason why they're staying in the community.
I think from the city of Forest Lake's perspective, it's going to be city staff. We've made some significant investments in our community development department in 22 and looking at some more additional in 23. We've recently hired a new community development director who's doing a fantastic job of being that point person from the development community to come in. I think before it was sort of intermixed among staff, so we've now kind of put that in one person's work plan. We've also hired a new planner, so we have a city planner as well who's doing a lot of the day-to-day planning activities for the city. So I think in terms of, how can we support development, we're building out our community development department again. I think in the past, we relied a lot on partnerships, a lot on outside resources, sort of assist with some of that, and bringing that all back in-house, I think will long-term provide a better experience for the developers. A lot of those details that may be overlooked in the past won't get overlooked anymore and will be known, from the start. We're also on the EDA side, looking at updating all of our policies for business assistance. So we're kind of going through a full top to bottom review of our current TIF policies, business assistance policies, and getting all of those updated and current. We recently just updated a downtown, or it was our former downtown capital improvement grant program, where if you did an exterior improvement to your building, you could qualify for a forgivable, or excuse me, an abatement at that point. We made that a forgivable loan program, so we now have some programs available to existing business owners that want to do some facade or exterior improvements. So we're looking at doing a lot of policy and program work as well to help support development.
Great, thank you. We have just a few minutes left. If anybody wants to ask a question, it'd be much appreciated, and so feel free to raise your hand. And any questions for the panel? Okay. All right, well, let's just do a quick wrap up and takeaways. What would you each want the audience or the online attendees to know about your organizations or communities? Just to give us some concluding remarks. Anything you want to wrap up with?
I'll just say there's a few things that for a wrap up in regards to our community. I'll just talk a little bit about what our residents are talking about in regards to what they want in our community. We do have a lot of residential development, and our commercial development has lacked a tad. And so the biggest thing that they're asking for in the community, and our city council would be really excited for something to come in, would be a restaurant user or a pharmacy user. We have a lot of medical in the city of Hugo. We have Fairview, we have Health Partners, we have Children's, and another private practice in the city. And so they're really looking to have a pharmacy to support those medical uses. We do have a couple sites available still in our industrial parks. And so I think that we're one of the rare communities that have rail that's accessible to all businesses in the city with our public team track. So there's a public easement over the rail spur for you to get goods into your business. And so there's commercial and industrial businesses that use that rail. But we have a good city council, which I think means a lot. I think our staff, in regards to retention at the city of Hugo, a lot of us have been there for a long time, and that comes from the top. And so you can imagine what it's like to work at the city of Hugo and have a business in the city of Hugo as well.
I think from the city's perspective is that we're making a lot of investments in, like I mentioned earlier, cleaning up or getting those data points that developers are looking for known, those unknowns known, as well as we're making significant investments in our community development department as a whole. So I think if you haven't looked at Forest Lake in the past or haven't looked at it for a while, I think stop by and take a look at us again. We've made significant strides or significant moves forward in terms of preparing ourselves for development and for redevelopment. So I think when you look back from when I started here 8 years ago to now, it's there's a lot more work. There's a lot of work that's been completed in those 8 years, and we're open for business.
Bruce, anything to wrap up?
Yeah, I think, with economic development, we all understand it's a long game, and 5 years ago when we launched the tech corridor, we're thinking, walls are going to be moving, or tipped up, dirt's going to be moving 5 years ago, and it's taken a little bit longer, but it's exciting to see that change happening now. Walls are going up. It's going to be exciting to see what's going to happen in the city of Hugo and the city of Forest Lake. So I think you're going to see a lot going on from here forward. So it's great to have them.
Great, thank you. And again, thank you for attending this morning. Please join me in thanking the panel, and then we've got a 10-minute break coming up.
Let's roll.
Good morning. How are you? Happy holidays. So nice to be here with you. I'm Laura Gill. I'm with Christianson and Company. I've been with Christianson Company as a broker since 2005. I mainly specialize in retail and also do some office and land. Primarily the area I work in is the Southeast Market.
Hi, my name is Mark Nordland. I'm a developer with Nordland Partners. I've been doing it for about 26 years here out of the Twin Cities. At a number of different places. I was at Ryan Companies and CSM, and had a company called Launch Properties for a while. And most recently was at Lifetime. I went in-house at Lifetime to build a platform to do mixed-use developments, including apartments and other things associated with the clubs as a core amenity. I left there about a year and a half ago and started my own company again, and primarily doing, well, I've got two big things I'm doing. One, a big mixed-use project in Chanhassen that I'm doing with Bahram Akradi, the CEO of Lifetime, and I've got, not Lifetime affiliated, just a private development. And then I've got an industrial development platform with a guy named Steve Buss at Likewise Partners. We are doing spec industrial buildings in the Midwest, primarily in Wisconsin right now, because that market is pretty favorable for us, but also looking to do more in the Twin Cities.
Hi, I'm Eric Van Oss. I'm with the city of Rosemount. I've been there about 3 years. I do the economic development programs for the city and industrial and commercial development.
Good morning. I'm Tina Goodroad, Community Development Director for the City of Lakeville. Been with the city for just 6 months now, so getting to learn Lakeville, but have experience across the Twin Cities metro area in planning and development.
Great, thanks. So we are covering the South Suburban Market, and that's what we're mostly covering is Lakeville, Rosemount, obviously Eagan, Apple Valley, Burnsville, and Inver Grove Heights. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview from the MNCAR quarterly report, the last one, the third quarter. So the retail that's under construction right now is actually the highest in the Twin Cities. That's 164,970. And the vacancy rate for retail right now is 6.6%, and the overall in the Twin Cities is 7.9%. The office medical construction is 291,902. The vacancy rate is 14%, and the industrial that's under construction is approximately 3 million. And the vacancy rate is 3.1%. So some of the trends that we've been seeing in the South market have been multifamily housing, affordable housing, which is high demand for sites, single family housing, industrial, people looking mostly want warehouse, not as much office, medical, self-storage. As far as the retail side goes, there's been some repurposing of restaurants and some new restaurants, and also quite a few grocery expansions. Is that what you're seeing, Mark?
I think the stuff that's doing well is doing really well, and the stuff that's not is doing, poorly, which is seems sort of obvious, but there's not a lot in the middle. But I think the real story is going to be what's on the horizon. As we just heard, the vacancy rates are low in general on most product types. But what's going to happen as far as financing and valuations going forward with interest rates rising and therefore cap rates being affected by that, I think is really going to impact the commercial side. And the single family side is, I think, most directly hit by what's happening with interest rates. Jeff Johnson and I were just talking out in the hall before we came in, and he refinanced his mortgage a couple of years ago at 1.75%. And if you look today, that rates in the 6s and 7s have doubled or almost tripled the cost of buying a home, even if valuations are going down or pricing is going down a little bit as that market slumps. So I think what's on the horizon is going to be the most interesting story here, and what happens over the next 6 to 12 to 18 months as we work through sort of this coming recession and what capital markets do to us.
Thanks, Mark. How about you, Eric? What are you seeing in Rosemount?
Sure. So our trends have really just ramped up throughout the year, both housing, industrial, and commercial. We have the Amber Fields development, which is a UMOR property in the eastern portion of Rosemount. That has been starting to break ground on the infrastructure that will eventually be a new community of about 2,500 new housing units. We have about 1,000 currently that have made it through the entitlement process. We recently had a few large multifamily projects, about 550 units total permitted, and then we have another about 500 in the pipeline. So we see demand for multifamily, more demand than we have sites currently guided for multifamily. Industrial is the other really big one. We have about 1.5 million industrial currently under construction, and we have around 600 to 800 acres available, but probably 90% of that has some type of conceptual project already in the pipeline. So our biggest issue now is really where is our expansion going to come from? Because our most easily developable areas are largely starting to fill up at this point.
Thank you. In Lakeville, I'm still doing a lot of development, somewhat similar to Rosemont in terms of the trends that we're also seeing. Multifamilies increased substantially in the city of Lakeville over the past 6 years. We've had 9 properties completed or under construction for over 1,500 units. And that is new to us, similar to Rosemont, where multifamily wasn't even really on our radar. Single family continues to remain strong. I believe Lakeville's been the highest growth in the metro for single family since 2015. Our starts this year have been a little bit lower due to the decline, about 315 new single family, but over 200 detached and attached townhomes. So both housing, both single family and multifamily will continue to remain strong. Like Eric in Rosemont, I think we'll continue to see some demand. We have an additional 500 units that are going through the approval process, both market rate as well as a senior building. Specialty medical has also been really big in Lakeville over the past 5-6 years. We've had probably 19 different types of medical facilities, from small dental clinics to chiropractor clinics to larger medical facilities, including Summit Orthopedics, Twin Cities Orthopedics, an Alina Surgery Center, those types of facilities to meet the growing demand. Lakeville has a population over 72,000 and is growing. Sometimes that surprises people at just how large Lakeville is. So a lot of the growth in services that we're seeing is really intended to meet the demand of the residents. And then industrial remains strong. Lakeville is blessed with a really large industrial zone and guided area, home to the Air Lake Airport, the existing industrial park, as well as areas for expansion through a couple of annexations. We still have over 680 acres available in our industrial park. We've had about 1.9 million square feet permitted or under construction over the past 3 years. We've had close to 1 million square feet approved this year. A couple of the spec buildings have been put on pause, waiting and seeing what happens with the market till spring. But we do still have remaining land already guided, available for services for development.
Thanks, Tina. So both in Rosemont and Lakeville and other communities, there's lots of opportunities for development. And so what would you say, Tina or Eric, what some of this streamlined processes to help brokers and developers work with you?
Sure. So I guess part of what we do is we always encourage everyone to meet early and meet often. In our experience, the city's timelines really remain the same. Our review time is about 45 days. You need a planning commission hearing and city council approval. Our review process doesn't really change that much internally. It's usually on the developer side of getting things in on time, getting them done well, making sure you know your consultants and having the consultants make sure that they are producing documents that are within our code and within our stormwater regulations and things like that. So our process really emphasizes meeting early. We want everything to go through at one time and not be seen again by the planning commission. So we try to work out any type of issues or variances even before the application is submitted. So when it is submitted, we have a complete application that is within the confines of the code. That should be really a straight up or down vote at the entitlement process. Additionally, things that we do, we're always kind of tinkering with our own code. Codes are kind of a behemoth. They're not updated regularly. They're kind of awful in a lot of ways. And so We regularly check in and do text amendments. We check in with developers. We did one recently on multifamily housing. We had a height restriction, I think it was 32 feet, which is not even based in anywhere near market reality currently. And we changed that to about 50. So we're regularly meeting with people, regularly updating the code, doing text amendments, making sure that the process and our code is based in the market conditions. So you're not coming to us with something that we're going to have to completely deviate from our code from or ask for variances in.
Yeah, I think I can piggyback a lot on what Eric had commented. The same holds true in Lakeville. I think it's really important to identify projects early, work with us, help us understand what your needs are. I think streamlining and making sure we're packaging different approvals together as efficiently as possible. I think all the timelines are going to be pretty similar across the metro area that you find for development. Lakeville is considered, we consider ourselves very friendly work group to get you through the process, and we'll do everything that we can to assist that. Eric hit on just dealing with and understanding what the needs of users are and how that might transcend into zoning. We've had some similar experiences this year from a design code standpoint. A developer was looking at a piece of property, and just some of our basic design standards was driving up the cost. And it was an office park designation versus an I-1 or light industrial designation. I think we all know around this room, some of that business park, office park designation just gets clunky. And just really trying to discover what the end user wants, whether it's a combination of warehouse and manufacturing and office. I think gone is the true office buildings, particularly in our market. We're just too far from the center city. So just understanding what the user's needs are. The developer came to me, shared that information. I was able to look at a lot of different codes and also a lot of product that group built, and make sure we were able to align our codes in a similar way. And I think it's important to share this information with our planning commissioners, our EDC members, as well as our city council, to make sure they understand what's going on in the market and what users need in order for these sites to develop.
Thanks, Tina. I think that's why mixed use is a really good option, so that we can put a variety of properties on the same plot of acres of land. So what, Mark, would you say has been a successful mixed use development that you've seen?
Yeah, so I think this is of course the Suburban Development Conference, and I think sometimes there's a misnomer about what mixed use actually means. People go to these conferences and they look at these just beautiful vertical mixed use projects that are taking place, but they're taking place in really urban environments generally, where you've got one building that has residential, and it's maybe got some office and hotel or apartments and all that all combined into one building, with below grade parking and everything else, and that works great in more urban environments and especially in some of the bigger cities. But I think mixed use is for sure needed in the suburbs, but it's generally more of a horizontal mixed use, right? If you think about what's happening in most developments, there's some retail, there's maybe some medical office, there's a multifamily development, sometimes there's hotel or other things, but they're spread out horizontally and interact with each other, and they really help to, parking works well. Generally, it's on the surface in the suburbs. It's the rare case where structured parking can make sense from a cost standpoint, and also I think from a user standpoint, people in most suburban markets, when they're going to buy groceries, aren't wanting to go into a parking structure, right, and try to figure out navigating a shopping cart through all that. I mean, they'll just go to a different store if that's the case. So, but I think over time, I think most suburban environments have done a pretty good job of adapting to that. The trickier thing, as you were just talking about, is with codes, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're mixed use zoning really isn't a thing necessarily. Most often, it needs to be some sort of a PUD kind of a zoning that makes sense for that specific site. But I think that's probably a good approach, because coming up with a catch-all mixed use zoning is a tough thing to do. You could end up with some unwanted types of development. If you're too broad or if you're too narrow, you end up having to, do variances or exceptions for everything that happens there. But it's very successful in all these south suburban markets. You see quite a bit of it, and I think those uses work together well.
Thanks, Mark. Is there any particular sites that you have, Eric and Rosemont, that's working?
Sure. Yeah, so I think Mark will probably talk about the specifics of this later, but we have a intersection in Rosemont along County Road 42 where we're doing a rec center in partnership with Lifetime. That's being kind of billed as a mixed use district as much as it can be in a third ring suburb. Like Mark said, we don't necessarily have our own mixed use zoning designation. It's done via PUD. So the site itself is being broken into several different sites of multifamily housing, commercial, and that's kind of really done well. We have another couple of sites in our downtown that have taken a similar model. They've been a standalone residential building with a portion of standalone commercial. They're not necessarily connected, but they're on the same site. Ron Clark recently did a development in downtown Rosemont called the Morrison that incorporates that. Commercial is always a lagging indicator. Most of these residential buildings get built first, and we fully understand that the commercial side of it probably will come a year, 2, 3 years later as the mixed use districts begin to fill up with residents.
Is there any particular that you wanted to talk about?
I'm still new, so I'm not, the names of developments are still not coming to me, but I think one of the things that Lakeville has done really well is in their land use planning. They've really identified, we have a lot of major county road corridors as well as 35, and they've done a really good job of land use planning on those corridors to identify commercial high density, and along Cedar in some of the future rapid transit areas, identified areas from a land use standpoint with a mix of uses. So I think similar to Rosemont, we don't necessarily have a mixed use identified land use or zoning code, but within the zoning in those underlying areas, we've allowed by right a whole range of mix of uses. So we have a development with the 2 latest apartment projects, 179 unit market rate, and then a senior building that will go immediately next to it. The remaining outlots will be for future commercial. So again, not the vertical, but the horizontal is going to be what is going to be most successful in the suburbs. And that's just one example of several in Lakeville that have or are developing that way.
Tina, yes, I think in the suburbs it is better to have one building doing this, another building doing that, rather than trying to mix the two together in one building. From a leasing perspective, it's typically a little bit harder for us brokers to lease the retail on the bottom and have residential on top, even though that exists. Just seems with the food uses, it's a little bit harder to get the ventilation going on the bottom retail when there's residential on the top. So did you want to talk about your Lifetime project that you did in Rosemont?
Sure. We can, Eric and I can probably both talk about it a bit. I'm working on it because, I'd worked in-house at Lifetime and they needed a developer to come in and help with the land around them. They're working in partnership with the city of Rosemont to put a full-scale Lifetime club at Akron and 42 on a site that the city has under contract, and it's about a 30-acre site. And about half of it will be for the club, and about half of it will be a mixed-use development, just like we're talking about here. And that's the land that I'm going to develop. The Rosemont was proactive in wanting some sort of a recreation center in their community. They reached out. I think they'd been working with the Y prior, but then reached out to Lifetime to see if they would put a facility in their market, just based on the scale of a Lifetime club and the draw that they need. Rosemont was still a little bit green from a market standpoint for putting a full-scale club in the community, and so Rosemont got creative with using some bonding and other things to help to subsidize the initial building of that facility, allow Life to come in, 5 or maybe 10 years ahead of where they would have otherwise come into a community like that and do the facility. And then it also has a halo effect around it, which is why that mixed-use project that I'm doing around it makes a lot of sense. There's quite a bit of land still along 42 in Rosemount, but all of a sudden when you put a $50 million facility that's going to have thousands of people at it every day in place there, the land around it becomes much more attractive for other uses. So, and if I can echo one thing that Laura said, requiring retail in the ground level of apartments, which I know is very popular among cities all over the country. Nobody's unique to that. Is not a good idea. It works in some cases, and when it works, the market will do that. But when it doesn't work, you end up with vacant retail, or having to subsidize some deals that go in there and tenants that continually roll in and out. It's a tricky thing to do. In the markets where it makes sense, the developers will do it at the beginning to have an amenity for their residents. But otherwise, doing a vertical or a horizontal mixed-use project like we're doing out there, we'll have some multifamily, but we'll also hopefully have a grocer and some coffee and maybe a bank and a medical office building and some other things. They all work together well, and they provide amenities for each other, but they don't need to be in the same building.
Yeah, I would just add, I think the whole project came together over several years. It's really been 5 years in planning, and it's taken many different iterations. But eventually, we kind of came together and looked holistically of what do we want the rec center to do. Like, a lot of communities just have a rec center for the sake of, obviously recreation, but we wanted it to be a catalyst for development elsewhere in the city. Some of our biggest, comments from residents are, we want new commercial centers, we want new experiential retail. And so, we thought constructively, how do we get this? The Lifetime is a major anchor, it's a major generator of traffic. It makes sense to put high density developments around it. And then those types of users, those types of high-end users, those types of kind of high-end market rate apartments will then attract something more than just the Taco Bell or what have you to that development at kind of the higher end retail users that we're looking for our residents. So the whole process was pretty intentional. We did a whole corridor visioning study over the course of a year in 2020 that kind of envisioned a full build out of the corridor. And that's something that we use with developers, trying to attract them to the area, just so we can kind of get that kind of next tier of development that we haven't historically seen in our more historic commercial areas.
Well, I just say hats off to Eric and the city for being proactive about it. Not only doing a plan, which a lot of folks do, but when they realized that the plan didn't match up with today's market, rather than wait for the market, they looked creatively at how they could advance the ball sooner. And I think they're gonna have a real successful project because of it.
Great, congratulations. So what, Tina, is there something that the city does to help facilitate development opportunities?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that cities can work together, not only what we've talked about before in terms of streamlining the development process and understanding what the end user needs might be, but there's always financial opportunities that we can facilitate the development process when it makes sense, through TIF and other methods, the deed programs, things to help facilitate some of the expansion of infrastructure that might be needed for some of these developments. One of the things Lakeville also strives to do is really understand the workforce needs. Lakeville is in a partnership with the Chamber and the Lakeville School District in our Lakeville Works program. This is an initiative that has over 20 businesses that are participants that work directly with the schools in this partnership to bring students into these different manufacturing companies, get them exposure, help them navigate jobs even while in high school, and then also navigate what types of technical degrees they might need in order to fill some of these positions in our manufacturing companies. So it's been widely successful. So that's one other unique aspect that Lakeville brings to the workforce needs for both existing as well as prospective businesses. I think the other option when it comes to infrastructure is we've done public infrastructure through assessments. That's oftentimes a good tool for us and do the public improvement and assess back to the property owner. So there's a lot of different tools in the toolbox. It really depends on what each individual development needs are, but we're not afraid to get creative and find solutions to get a piece of land developed.
Do you have anything to add on that, Eric?
Yeah, kind of like what Lakeville does, we try to have a wide toolbox, both, large kind of incentives or programs and even smaller niche ones. For greenfield development sites and suburban communities that are not built out, I think most of the practitioners that you work with are always kind of looking beyond your site as a whole, particularly in areas that are for industrial or business park. Our infrastructure isn't necessarily built out, so each project we're looking at is like a piece of a puzzle of how do we get your project done, but then also extend our infrastructure, our roads, our water mains to the larger service area that would then build out the entire area. So we kind of look at it on a larger scale a lot of the time. And then we do a lot of things on like the smaller scale as well. Like we did a city facade grant for existing buildings, to kind of improve signage, landscaping, things like that for existing business owners. Restaurants have been a real priority for the city of Rosemount, attracting more types of higher end restaurants. We're continuously told that the SAC and WAC fees through the Met Council are, kind of burdensome for getting that done. So we created a SAC offset program. We'll offset up to $10,000 of SAC credits for any type of restaurant user in the city. So it's really, we have a wide array of tools that we can use. It really depends on the size of the project, the scale of the project, and then the type of the user. But we try to have a pretty wide net of aid that we can bring to the table.
That's super exciting. The SAC-WAC charges have always been an issue. And I was just wondering, does the landlord have to sign off on that 10,000 that you were mentioning, or is that just something that's?
No, not to get into the whole SAC and WAC
Yeah.
bureaucracy. So if you were to defer SAC payments, the landlord would have to sign off, but for a user just moving in, paying the SAC charges, we'll just waive the 10,000 in fees for those types of users. It makes it pretty easy and not a lot of paperwork.
Good to know. So just going on with some of the trends, so there are quite a few grocery stores that have gone into the South Suburban market. Just mentioning a few in Egan that have gone in recently was the Amazon grocery store. It hasn't opened yet. That's the self-checkout type. And then the Hy-Vee is going in off of Diffley. And that was that building right off of Pilot Knob and Diffley. If any of you are familiar with it, it was kind of vacant for quite some time. And so Hy-Vee purchased that building, and there's going to be a coffee shop on the end, and then they're going to have some delivery services there. And then Trader Joe's finally opened in the south side of Egan, which the mayor there was trying to get really for a long time. But they finally have moved into some of the suburbs. And Lenz and Byerly's is going into Apple Valley. And Tina, you mentioned one was going into Lakeville.
Yes, we have a redevelopment of an existing grocery store. It's unnamed at this time, but it is being expanded and redeveloped. But we have several other grocery stores, including a Hy-Vee. Our Hy-Vee is looking at an expansion as well.
Yeah, and I think there was a mystery grocery store going in Burnsville too, and also an Asian grocery store in Burnsville is planned for the Burnsville Mall. So also the outlots at the grocery store, some of them are going to have Popeyes on there. So I wanted to get that in there. My son is super excited about one of them going in front of Cub. He's just so excited. I remember going to ICSC so many times and saying, do you want to expand in Minnesota? And they didn't want to for so long, but finally they're coming here. Is there, let's see, what else would you like to add about the interest rates and the suburban development and how that's going to impact development?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the big takeaway, we've all had a great run, right? The last, I don't know how many years you go back, 5, 6, 7 years have been, a strong growth period, and it's sort of really rallied. This past year, there's a recession coming if it's not already here. It's self-induced. It's probably necessary in order to get inflation under control. And I think we're just starting. So if you look at the numbers, you look at vacancy rates, they're great. You look at what's happened, in all these markets, metro-wide throughout the country, and for sure in the south suburban markets. It's been fantastic. I think the question is going to be what's going to happen, this coming year, and I think you got to kind of break it down by each food group, if you will. Single family, has been on fire. The interest rates are going to directly hit it, like I talked about before, and I think you're going to see a lot fewer new homes and a lot fewer transactions here over the next, 12 months. My crystal ball gets pretty fuzzy after about 9 months, probably. It's pretty tough to see exactly when we're going to kind of peak on some of these interest rate rises and have it start to come back down. I think multifamily will benefit from that because there's all these people that were out trying to buy homes. We're struggling anyway because the housing market was increasing in cost so much, and now that the cost of borrowing has doubled or tripled, they're going to more often be on the sidelines, at least for a little while longer. So I think that we could actually have some additional rent growth on the multifamily side. And I think multifamily developers are going to figure out a way to get their projects funded, even though it's tricky to figure out what cap rates are going to look like on the backside of those deals. But the demand is so strong, I think they're going to keep going. Industrial has been unreal, right? We've had the most growth in industrial that we've ever had, and it's really been that, and multifamily been the darlings of the investment world. What I'm seeing anyway is that industrial demand hasn't come off very much. I mean, vacancy rates are extremely low, and there's still a lot of industrial companies that want space. I think where we're going to have an issue is the supply side. As we've heard here, and I think you'll see over the next, again, 6, 9, 12 months, a lot of projects that were planned are going to be on the shelf for a little while. Not so much because you can't get financing, and construction financing costs more, right? Interest rates are higher, you're paying more in interest payments, but that doesn't affect the industrial as much as the residual cap rate, so what the building's worth at the end. And so if generally investors aren't going to want to buy things that are negative leverage, right? So if you look at a loan constant, if you even use a 30-year amortization and today's rates, the loan constants are so that the actual percentage of your that you're paying on that loan each year, including your interest and your principal, is much higher than what I think cap rates are, and so investors aren't going to buy buildings and use leverage if the leverage is negative, has a negative effect on them. And, we've been generally building industrial buildings somewhere in the 6s is sort of the return on cost people are trying to get in order to sell them in the low 5s or even in the 4s. Now, if the cap rates are in the 6s, and if the construction costs are the same and the rents are about the same, you're not going to build a building, that's at best case going to break even if you had to sell it. I think cap rates will eventually go back down a bit, but I don't think a lot of investors are going to take that bet yet. I think they're going to wait to see sort of a point of clarity when the Fed stops raising rates and they can start to see that market loosen up. So I think we'll see definitely a supply constraint there. The retail, we've heard grocery, service retail, those things are all, continue to do well. Rents are going to need to go up more to meet the current interest rate environment. It'll be interesting to see. It feels like some of the national retailers are, sort of limitless with the rent they can pay. I was just talking to a retail developer yesterday, and he said, 60 is the new 40 as far as it relates to small shop, national retail tenants. So that, the coffees and the food users and so forth going into strip centers are paying $60 a square foot net, which is, mind-boggling. But they're in small spaces and they generate a lot of revenue. So I think that could work okay. But I do think we're all going to see a pretty significant slowdown in new projects that come on, even if demand remains strong. It's just the supply is going to be more constrained.
Well, the good news is that there's been a lot of single-family residence going up and a lot more residential, and we all know that the retail follows the rooftops. So I look at it a little bit more optimistic, so.
Well, I think it's short term. I mean, hopefully this happens, we get rid of inflation, and then things can get a little bit more normalized. But I think in the meantime, people don't know what the cap rates are, so what the buildings are gonna be worth, and it's tough to start a project with today's cap rates being probably where you would break even at best on those projects. And the rent growth that would be required to make them not that way, I think is gonna be tough to get out of the current tenants.
Exactly, and I know that we've all been so spoiled on the interest rates, but when developers say I can't do the numbers, and people were doing deals under Reagan, people were doing deals under Clinton, so just saying. Hopefully we can get back to that mindset so that we can overcome it and try to figure out a way to work it out. And I know that there was talk about the supply chain, and so hopefully that'll get better and we can bring some of the prices down on the costs of materials. So is there anything that in your city, Lakeville, that you think that you would like there, what you would like to see there based on talking to the city council or the planning commission, some of the uses that Lakeville would like to see?
People, when we're out in the community, people love living in Lakeville, both businesses as well as the residents. So we have a lot of positive feedback. As mentioned, we've had interest in a lot of new restaurants over the past several years. What makes Lakeville really unique is while we do have the chains, we also have a lot of local owned and original restaurants. Our downtown is a really unique element. It's a historic downtown. Not too many people in this room may know that we have a historic downtown, but that's a really unique area. It's seen a resurgence since 2016. Downtown development guideline has been updated. A lot of emphasis on pedestrian amenities as well as trail and pedestrian connections to our greenways that go through the entire community. There's been about $3 million in public investment in the downtown and about $7 million in private. And a lot of that is the locally owned restaurants. Lakeville Brewing is a brewery and restaurant. B52s has a second location that's been in our downtown for the past couple of years. And they've opened up another restaurant right next door called The Better Half, coffee shops, retail, and another brewery all within the downtown. So it's one of the things that sets Lakeville apart in the South Metro is having the historic downtown. The Lakeville Arts Center is a great anchor for that, providing gallery space, classroom space, as well as an event center. I think outside of the downtown, some of the things we hear and would like to see more of would be maybe kind of that retail recreation type of use. Again, Lakeville's commercial areas are surrounded around our major transportation corridors versus just one large area of concentrated commercial. So from a site standpoint, we struggle a little bit in having the sizable sites for such a use, but we do have several still available. All of that is located on our website. We have a great interactive development map that identifies areas that are going through the review process as well as available sites. So we are interested in more of that kind of expanded commercial recreation type of uses. And then, expanding of, the services. I think that's probably what Lakeville's been doing the best in terms of meeting the service needs of all of the residents.
Thanks, Tina. How about in Rosemont? What would you like to see there?
So I think we're seeing a lot of what we want to see. Retail is obviously always a lagging indicator. It comes usually much later than the housing. But we're seeing a lot of uses and types of businesses that are unique to Rosemont that we've seen in other communities starting to take form there. So we had a new brewery, North 20, open this summer. Omni Brewing in Maple Grove is opening a second location. Farm Winery opening this Monday in Rosemont. So we're seeing a lot more type of like experiential, higher end niche users coming in. We have a pretty established downtown like Lakeville and business corridor. So a lot of people want independent retailers. Really, in a town of 26,000, how many independent retailers can you really have? We have 3 boutiques, clothing boutiques. We have a ag supply store. Things like that that realistically add to the fabric of our business community. It's unclear how many more boutiques a town like that can support, but I think it's a pretty good indication of the business community that we have. Again, we're also seeing a lot of things related to recreation, experiential, children's sports, like sports domes, things going in the business park like that. Things that we need, opposed to want, are really things like more daycare facilities. We need kind of more medical office. A lot of our attention is focused on consumer retail experience, but there are a lot of fundamental types of retail that we need that there's a huge demand for. Daycare is probably one of the biggest gaps we have in the community. And then just kind of more medical office outside of dentists, chiropractors, that type of thing, clinics. So that's probably our next focus. A lot of the retail that people want is starting to come in. It just takes a little time. So we're kind of looking at that next level of things that are not necessarily sexy, but are definitely needed within the community.
I think one other thing I could add, and Eric would probably piggyback on this. I concur the expansion of daycare. We have seen several daycare facilities going through the review process for construction into the new year, which is great. City of Lakeville is also undergoing a housing needs assessment. While we've seen a big uptick in multifamily, which is great, we really need to dial in on exactly what our workforce needs are right in Lakeville. The study is going to be intentional to tie and identify the gap between what our existing housing, both from an ownership side as well as a rental side, what that cost is compared to, and understand the gaps from the wages across our industries in all of our sectors in Lakeville. So that's going to be an important study while we identify what our workforce housing needs may be, to understand the amount of land that we have remaining guided for such properties to ensure we're able to fill that gap. And I think to meet any workforce needs, housing is something that is always a struggle and something cities need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, I would just piggyback off that as well. Historically, Rosemount, we've exported people to the urban core to work. We are now becoming an employment center in our own right. We have a FedEx facility that'll be about 600 jobs, probably opening next year. We have a Home Depot distribution facility that just opened last month. These facilities are huge. They're anywhere from several hundred to 1,500 jobs in 3 shifts for a 24-hour period. The people have to come from somewhere, preferably they can live close by. Even the high density that we've been building, which we have had quite a good number of permitted units come online, those are largely market rate. The wages that are being paid at most of these facilities are, maybe a hair over $20 an hour. They're not necessarily living in a market rate new building, nor are they necessarily buying the $600,000 Lennar homes that are coming online. So finding a way to get workforce housing into an increasingly smaller number of sites devoted to it is something that we are very cognizant of and working on.
Yes, I saw the other day that the median house price in Rosemount is almost $500,000. So you're higher than Mendota Heights now.
Yeah. Well, and I think when you look at how affordability is measured, like the median income in most of Rosemount is over 6 figures, is over 100,000. So if you're doing a project at 60% AMI, I mean, you're still looking at 60,000+. I mean, that's your teachers, that's your municipal workers, that's, a huge range of people in your community that are getting priced out of the market, not just necessarily people working at these new distribution centers or industrial projects, but you have a whole swath of people where the affordability is becoming a bigger and bigger issue.
Thanks. Did you want to add anything then of things that you have kind of seen that the South Suburban market needs?
I think it's getting a lot of what it needs other than affordable housing, which I think is needed everywhere. And I think it's frankly, it's too large an issue just from an economic standpoint for cities to tackle for the most part. I mean, it feels like that's a state and really a federal thing that needs to be done. I mean, I've got an affordable project that we've been trying to do forever, and we keep going back for around of tax credits, and we just can't get them because they're just so oversubscribed. A guy a buddy of mine that worked for me at Lifetime and split off, just finally got his first project done, and he was 3 years going through the cycles of trying to get his tax credit bonding in place. Just finally got it and broke ground, but there's not, I mean, that takes a lot of time and a lot of patience to be able to get those deals done, and it doesn't even come close to meeting the need that's out there.
Great. Are there any questions for the panel?
Mark, do you want to talk about the other development you said you were doing with Durham? Is that part of that Lifetime?
Yeah, that's, I don't know how we debate if that's a Western market or a South market, but the West, I just got a thumbs up from McCarthy over there, so he's okay trampling on his territory a little bit. But, so yeah, it's a 120-acre piece of land on the call it new Highway 212, which was opened actually right in the last downturn, right in 2008 or so, that opened up. But Bahram Akradi and a couple of other investors bought the piece of land for cash about 7 years ago. It's right at Powers Boulevard at 212 to do a large-scale mixed-use project. I started working on it with them a while ago, probably about 5 years ago, and got the zoning in place, the PUD in place. There's some wetlands that needed to be mitigated and got that approved. And then the markets, kind of kept hitting the brakes as far as retail. There was a significant amount of retail on the site initially, and it's continued to shrink as far as the amount of retail, but still wanting to make it a regional draw. So now we started moving dirt last summer and are just about complete with about $20 million of roads and infrastructure work there. And the first houses will start to go up in January. Not the greatest time to break out of Minnesota, but wanting to get models done and open for next fall's parade, which seems like a long ways off. But it'll end up having about 1,000 units of housing in total. About 100 are single-family kind of homes, but mostly apartments in a senior project. There's a grocery store. There's a big entertainment district with restaurants and other things. Working with the city of Chanhassen potentially for a large sports complex on the site as well. So anyway, it's an exciting project, and it's an example of the horizontal mixed use that I think really makes sense, especially in these suburban environments and where all those uses can interact well together and make each other all better.
Another question in the back?
Yeah, so that was my project when I was at Lifetime. It's now the gentleman named Eric Padgett is leading that group now, and it's his project. But they have proposed a project to the city that's gone through part of the city process, and I think they're refining that right now based on some of the city feedback, as well as trying to get pricing in line to make sense. But it's a high-end luxury project that will use the club as the centerpiece amenity for it. So everybody that lives there will have a membership at Lifetime and be able to go to all the Lifetime clubs across the country, but have a club that's immediately adjacent to their apartment as a core amenity. I think it's a really great thesis. There are several that are now open. I was just out in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago at the first one that was designed by Lifetime and built in Green Valley Ranch, which is in Henderson. And it's doing phenomenally well. It's getting about 40% above market rents on that facility, and it's doing really well. So there's one in Coral Gables that we did. There's one in Boston that will open soon. There's some stuff in Chicago. So there's quite a bit of stuff that's underway. But specific to France Avenue, obviously there's a lot going on in that whole corridor right now. I know Teddy Carlson just got his, he just announced, I think Northmark is the lead tenant for his office building where they had just torn down a building at, is that 72nd or 74th or something in France there. But there you go, 7250, which I think is a great project. Edina has been very strict about where they will allow the height to happen, and they've been pretty true to their zoning, and a lot of people have proposed things on the west side of France that have been shot down because it didn't meet their guidance, but the stuff on the east side I think is getting obviously more dense. The Gray Star building that went up is doing extremely well there. Is it the Bower or the Bowery, I think it is, and I think Lifetime will do very well if they when they get that project underway.
Okay, yeah, okay, one more question.
Mark, I was interested in the Rosemont site that is with the type of mixed use or other uses around the lifetime. What do you anticipate?
Yeah, we're working with a grocer trying to do that. I think that's like the holy grail of, you know, if you've got multifamily, which will be part of it, you've got a Lifetime and you've got a grocer. If you just think of that little triangle for those people that live in the housing project, it's just like, it's sort of magical to have all that stuff right out your door. There'll be some additional, you know, service kind of retail. There's a bank that's interested. There's some medical office that's interested. So those types of uses will fill out. There's about 15 total acres there, so you don't get too many users before we're done with the project, but you know, 4 or 5 uses probably on that site.
I would just add, there's another about 20 acres on the adjacent intersection to that site outside of it that are also zoned for commercial, that will probably have kind of a smaller scale, kind of like retail users, if you will.
Yeah, something that's amazing to me about that is, you know, so we've got some multifamily planned on this site, but there are 5 total projects that are all well underway to do multifamily sort of all at the same time in Rosemont, which is, if you back up, I don't know how many years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I mean, all the multifamily was being built was in Minneapolis and St. Paul, or the very first tight ring of suburbs, you know, Edina, St. Louis Park, some of those areas at least on this side of town. And now, you know, the suburbs are fully getting, you know, a lot of, I mean, probably more so than Minneapolis and St. Paul for a number of reasons right now, but it's amazing how many, that's got to be over 1,000 units.
There's probably about 1,200 units within, you know, less than a quarter of a mile within the Lifetime that we're developing on different sites there. So where there are none currently, if you go there today, and about 500 or so have made it through the entitlement process. So quite a bit.
Great, exciting. Well, thank you so much to the panel for being here, and thank you for listening.
Good morning. Looks like there might be a few people still wandering in from the break here. So we're gonna just jump right in. I'm Brianne Rothstein. I'm the Economic Development and Housing Director in Brooklyn Park, and I'm here moderating the North Suburban panel this morning. And so I have some lovely guests that I will be letting them introduce themselves. So the first question to kick us off here is, in a few short minutes, please describe, give us an intro of yourself, what your affiliation is, and then for the cities on the panel and the county, a little bit about your particular jurisdiction. Trevor, you want to start?
Sure. My name is Trevor Martinez. I'm a developer at Sherman Associates. I've been there for about 2.5 years, but I've been in the development world for probably about 8 or so. Sherman is a local developer of multifamily housing, both in the affordable and on the market rate side, and we also have a number of hotel and commercial properties as well.
My name is Brent O'Neill. I'm at the City of Elk River, Economic Development Director there. Lifelong career in the government economic development world. I spent 10 of those years of my career so far in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. But I'm a Minnesota native, so happy to be back up in this area. I'm in the City of Elk River, consider ourselves an exurban community, about 25,000 people. Again, kind of on the edge of the Twin Cities fringe, but do have a lot of independent retail and regional center type activities there. We're continuing to grow, but I think our growth has slowed down a little bit over the years as we built out a little bit. I'm looking forward to discussing some more.
My name is Gregory from Gill. I'm the Director of Economic Development with Anoka County. I have a background in municipal economic development, commercial real estate and development, both of those in the Madison, Wisconsin area. And then my husband and I opened up our own veterinary urgent care center, which brought us back to the Minneapolis area. So that's still up and running, but I was able to get back into my career focus at economic development. So joined Anoka County in this past August, so a little over 4 months on the job. And Anoka County Regional Economic Development, it's an interesting collaboration partnership with 21 municipalities within Anoka County, and then our industry partners such as Connexus Energy. You heard from Bruce Sayler earlier. It's very geographically unique. We have the fully built out urban areas of Columbia Heights, Fridley, kind of that mid-level, Blaine, Coon Rapids, Ramsey, Anoka, and then the growing kind of rural hubs, such as East Bethel, St. Francis, where you get some of those rural residential communities like Oak Grove, and now then being able to feed into some of those kind of rural hubs. So it's just a really interesting dynamic mix that provides a lot of opportunity for business to be able to kind of find their particular niche, and then really focused on that Minnesota Tech corridor on the east side of the county with Washington County and Connexus Energy on growing tech opportunities out there.
Good morning, Nancy Hoffman, the Executive Director of the Chisago County HRA EDA. I've been doing economic development for a few years, working in rural cities, suburban cities, regional development commissions, as well as counties. I've most recently been with Chisago County now for 10 years. This year was 10 years for me. We are part of the Twin Cities metropolitan statistical area, the 13 counties, and we do feel like we're a transitioning county more so into the suburban type community. Just to give you some context, sometimes people aren't really understanding where counties are, but we have cities going up I-35, starting like with Wyoming, Stacy, North Branch, Harris, and North Branch. And then following Highway 8, we have again Wyoming, Chisago City, Lindstrom, Center City, Schaefer, and Taylor's Falls. You might have a better idea where we're located by the name of the cities. Healthcare is our largest industry, and part of that is due to having the corporate headquarters of Hazelden Betty Ford, huge employer in our area, and then followed by manufacturing. And manufacturing really is one of our focus areas for Chisago County. We do have a strong manufacturing industry. We have, just to mention, we have Rosenbauer America, Anderson Window, Plastic Products, Kendall Howard, Polaris Research and Development, and many more. We have a wonderful supply chain, maybe not how we think of supply chain anymore, but many many new businesses that support those businesses that I had just mentioned. Chisago is a beautiful area. It's really known for its recreation and great for outdoor enthusiasts. So we do end up having a lot of people living in our area and then commuting to the metro area. So we do have a large commuting population. Because of that, COVID, we did a commuter study in-house and learned a lot about who's in our area and where are they going. And then based on that in our target marketing group, we also hired Cushman Wakefield to do a study for us on the labor capacity and just a labor assessment. And we were very pleased with what it showed, and that was done for the industrial businesses, primarily manufacturing, warehousing, supply chain. And it really did pay for itself. We had one of our existing businesses look at that study, and they were debating on where should they locate. Because of that study, they decided to expand in our county. So it really did help us out quite a bit. I'll stop there.
All right, thank you. So this question is for all the panelists, and the question is, what are you noticing in the North Metro market, maybe in the last 6 months, the last year? What are you noticing? Trevor, you can start again.
Sure. I think that we've noticed that a number of these communities are getting more and more sophisticated. I think that you've heard developers, get on stages and talk about how they're delivering community or delivering product in communities that haven't seen deliveries in 30, 40 years and things of that nature. And so as more and more examples come through and cities have either lessons learned or otherwise, you're seeing more and more architectural standards, or they're providing easier pathways or having more tailored processes for specifically housing delivery and certainly industrial delivery. That's been a huge driver in the North Metro as well.
Yeah, I see, especially in the outer line areas, the availability of land is bringing a lot of building construction. You see that as far south as Brooklyn Center and Maple Grove. By the time you get to Elk River, I think we're about 10 miles past that point where you start to see that interest slow down a little bit. We're trying to make as much inventory in the land sector available, trying to recruit things like data centers, distribution, and primary employment. Another thing we see, and I think many of you would observe or say as well, in the residential or the commercial residential side, the construction costs are really uniform across the metro, but the rents dissipate by the time you get 30, 40 miles from the core of the city. And from a new construction standpoint, we're seeing kind of a tough balance between reconciling those construction costs and the rents that can be achieved on those properties. So we are seeing a lot of interest in again, both commercial and residential and some mixed use development, but trying to bridge that gap with that cost differential is a bit of a challenge.
Great.
Yeah, we're seeing still really extensive investment in the north side. I think one of the key drivers of that is new infrastructure projects, Highway 10 reconstruction, Highway 65 that's slated to get rolling in a handful of years. It's really bringing a lot of those communities just that much closer, predictable commute times, predictable in industrial and distribution transportation. Very strong interest in ownership, but not really a whole lot of opportunity that's out there. So we're putting a lot of focus on the development readiness, the speed to market, trying to be able to get those build to suit opportunities as short of a timeline as possible, understanding, switch gear and that kind of thing for the heavy power users is a major problem. Spec industrial, 450,000 square feet going up in Ramsey, 300,000 in Blaine, 450,000 in under permitting in Lino Lakes. Bruce mentioned the Amazon distribution in Centerville. So there's just a ton of kind of that industrial emphasis again on those transportation corridors, 35W for a lot of those projects. Seeing a lot of major redevelopment projects in more of those urban communities. Columbia Heights, Alatus is doing a 70, or just opened the ratio project, $70 million mixed use. They have another project under contract, I believe, for 13-acre master plan just up the road on Central. So we're starting to see a lot of that just, going vertical on some of those communities just right outside of that urban core. And then, a lot of the municipalities really, again, focusing on that programming aspect, things, we're talking about approval processes and that kind of thing, focus on speed to market. Anoka County will be launching early 23 a pre-development grant program to be able to help with some of the geotechnical wetland delineation. We understand there's a lot of wetlands in Anoka County, so getting that information known as quick as possible to make the job for the brokers and developers that much easier, trying to really focus on that speed to market.
On the housing front, we have also been seeing housing just booming in many of our communities. In the Star Tribune in 2021, they did a ranking out of the 13 counties. I believe it was about 130 cities. And we had 4 cities rank in the top 25 for hot housing markets. and Stacy being number one out of all of them, and then Lindstrom, North Branch, and Wyoming also fell in that. You know, I thought it was primarily due to COVID. A lot of people could live in another place and commute to work, or George Floyd, you know, a little safer out in our more rural areas. But hearing the housing prices in Rosemont, maybe it's that, bringing people to our community, a little lower housing prices as well. Not saying they're low though, they're going up as anywhere. As far as the industrial side, we are seeing tremendous growth with our existing businesses. Seems just so many of them are expanding. We're seeing smaller developments coming our way though, probably from your communities, or where they can't find a site, you know, between 5, 20, 30,000 square feet fitting into our industrial parks. But we do have great property. We have over 200 square foot, I'm sorry, 200 acre industrial park in North Branch that is just ripe for development, and we're kind of waiting for it to come our way. There's a rail that goes right by it. It's shovel ready and right off of I-35. Really looking for some development to happen there, more and more inquiries, but we just haven't seen it happen there yet. We have a few other smaller industrial parks. We're starting to get some calls with people anticipating that marijuana will be legalized for some of our more rural industrial parks for cultivating. So we're seeing a little bit of that. The downtowns are filled. We certainly have a few redevelopment sites that could be filled or expanded. So we're looking for that type of development as well, but happy to see all the buildings filled again.
Great, so it sounds like there's some common themes amongst your report out on what you're noticing in the North Metro market, perhaps a willingness to streamline housing projects more so than ever before. I know it's still really difficult to do housing projects, but Trevor and I were just talking about that a little bit before this session here, but perhaps an opening up of that willingness, and then also just noticing and experiencing the ability or desire to market the land and have the land developed, willingness to develop their land, but also acknowledging the challenges with the rents vis-a-vis the construction costs. So you're going to feel that more in North Metro probably than other markets. And as time goes by, that likely changes to the point of you know, being able to see the commuting patterns change and having people be able to perhaps live and work farther out due to the more flexible work environments that we're seeing. So those are some of the themes I heard about the market in the North Metro specifically. The next question is, as opposed maybe to some of the other panels, what makes North Metro unique? And I'll start with Nancy, and if you just, I know you've touched on some of these things, but Nancy has a great story that highlights one of the unique aspects of North Metro. Yeah, we talked about maybe it's even just being very north. A lot of the businesses that have started in Chisago County continue to stay there and grow. I was going to tell a story about one, but I couldn't figure out which one was the best. So I'm going to fill you in on a few things. For instance, I mentioned Hazelden. That was Hazel's Den. That's where people used to go, men particularly, to dry out. And it's now this big corporate headquarters and facility for drug abuse. We have Rosenbauer America, who was general safety in Chisago County, and now is part of the biggest fire truck maker in the world. And they just expanded into a 100,000 square foot building and are looking for more expansion. They have the first ever all electric fire truck that they're coming out with. So that's very big for them. Plastic Products is in Lindstrom, their corporate headquarters. They have 2 manufacturing in Chisago County, 1 in Princeton, and then 7 others nationally. And they just started in 1965. And so they've got great guns, and they do try to keep the work there. All these businesses do so much for our community, but there's one I really kind of wanted to touch on, and that is Plastech
Corporation in Rush City. The owner is Dennis Franzen, who you've probably heard of, owning the Franzen Banks, and at one time was part owner of the Timberwolves, and has had many investments and many things going on. In 2018, he decided to work with Pine Tech, and they offer every student coming out of Rush City schools free college for 2 years at Pine Technical College. He expanded that to Luck, Wisconsin, where he also had roots. And then now other communities are doing the same. Other businesses are starting to chip in and try to do similar. He really saw the need for not just more workforce, but quality workforce, and education is the way to do that. So we're just so fortunate to have those types of businesses in our community that give so much back to the county and to the area.
Gregory, what would you say is one of the unique aspects of North Metro as opposed to other markets in the metro?
A couple more broad things. I mentioned a little bit just kind of that geographically, diverse, being able to, really throughout the county go from that fully urban to the kind of that mid-level suburban to more of those rural hubs, and even opportunities within the kind of typically rural residential communities. Some of the communities are still, well and septic and don't have any intention of expanding urban services. And so that creates just an opportunity for certain types of small industrial, projects that are really focused on lowering their construction costs, and opportunity to maybe move a little bit further out. But then also those communities like East Bethel, like St. Francis, that do have public water and sewer, surrounded by communities that don't, then it really creates an opportunity for them to serve as that regional hub. The big thing for Anoka County is really focused on that quality of life, the just natural amenities of the area lakes and wetlands, parks, natural corridors, just the sheer volume of that area within the community has this really high level of quality of life and high recreational presence that is not as seen. I know from a development perspective, it certainly can create some additional questions and things to figure out. But from a resident perspective, from a labor talent perspective, it creates definitely that unique asset that will then draw businesses into that area.
I'd like to echo the recreation piece as well, in our area and probably anywhere on the fringe. We've got some great amenities. 2 rivers, Mississippi and Elk River, run through Elk River. Lake Orono is a great regional asset, and we, as a city, a couple years ago, did a sales tax referendum on recreation and park amenities, and as part of that, we're able to put a lot of funds into upgrading our parks, making them more regional center type parks, and building a ice arena event center facility on the high school campus. And that's been a real success so far. And I mentioned that a little bit because one thing, again, that we'd like to do is take more advantage of the recreational opportunities and the indoor and outdoor recreational opportunities in our community, and seeing some of the tourism that goes along with that. One of the very unique things, I think, for us up in the north and in Elk River in particular, is we're a crossroads between Highway 101, Highway 10, and Highway 169 as a gateway to the lakes area. And so we do get a lot of traffic through that area. And I think that in a lot of ways has supported our retail in addition to our own local market there. But we really want to take advantage of that as much as we can. Many of you may be aware of the traffic congestion in Elk River and the stoplights that really seem to gum up traffic there. We're part of a 3-year project right now to eliminate the 5 stoplights that run north and south through the highway in Elk River. 2 of those were replaced this last summer. 2 more will go away this coming season, and then the last one in 2024, all being replaced by interchanges. And we're really looking forward to the opportunity that does for our community. It's going to make traffic a lot better. It's also going to make inter-community traffic a lot better because of the fact that you don't have to spend so much time at a stoplight just to get from one side of the town to the other. So we're really looking forward to the opportunity there. I'll mention also on transportation, I think having those stoplights removed, having more bona fide freeway access is going to make us feel more a part of the metro as far as appeal for projects, and being able to say you can get to I-94 or 35 without a lot of hassle, because we will have expressways in Anoka County and Anoka City and Ramsey are all working on doing some things to improve Highway 10 as well. One other thing I'll mention, and then I'll pause, is we're in Sherburne County, meaning we're outside of the Met Council area. And so we are looking at our sewer infrastructure in particular a little bit different, and doing a little bit more on a case-by-case basis as particular pieces of property have development appeal or the need to expand our system. So that's something that we probably handle in some ways probably quite a bit different than Met Council.
And Trevor, from a developer's perspective, what would you say when you have a project in North Metro? Through your marketing team or even through your development process, what do you claim as the unique attributes?
Yeah, so there's a handful of different pieces. Number one of them is that land basis there is going to be, generally speaking, lower. As we acknowledge a lot of that is because it comes at a trade-off on a rent front. But in addition to that, there's also a large amount of willingness to provide different levels of subsidy for different projects that the city has in terms of targeted goals, whether that be employment and economic development driven, or that be housing driven for the employers that are already in that area. There's a huge amount of both manufacturing as well as service and mechanical, and also a whole lot of healthcare jobs that exist in the Northern Metro. And a lot of those jobs provide wages that are at a price point that is well above your classic quote unquote affordable housing level, but that is below the $2.30 a square foot that they're charging at most other suburban projects. And so in the North Metro, depending upon if you're in a Fridley, you're probably in a $2 a square foot sort of area, and then as you go north up into Coon Rapids, Elk River, and beyond, you're probably getting down to a 180, 170 square foot on a monthly rent basis. And so that those can be big drivers if you can get the levels of assistance needed to provide levels of return at that level. Now, is there going to be some level of creativity with the CD or with the city or any other sub-city provider in that area? Yes, but I think that a lot more of that flexibility, whether it's providing additional infrastructure or it's making a zoning process or loosening design standards or being willing to be flexible on parking ratios or things of that nature, we've certainly seen more so in the northern suburbs than we have elsewhere.
So I'm hearing a lot of common themes from you all. Investment in infrastructure, whether it's parks or transportation. That's one thing I've noticed is a significant commitment in the North Metro through joint powers agreements, coalition corridors. Those things are very strong in the North Metro and have resulted in the financial attention of the state to invest in increasing access. And I think part of that is just because the North Metro historically maybe didn't get as much as other areas, but in the last 10 years, I would just say I've noticed that coming together as counties and cities, North Metro really is a force of the legislature for transportation in particular, and you can see it on the ground in Highway 10 and Highway 65, and I'm sure there are many others. Those are just the ones I see. And then the other thing I really wanted to point out, which came up during our pre-call, was the presence of homegrown talent, and Nancy touched on this. But a lot of the businesses in North Metro started in North Metro and have grown and stayed local. And I do think that's a differentiator in the North Metro as compared to other areas where the growth in business is a lot of it is attributed to those businesses that started or the residents that lived in the North Metro. And so there are so many examples that I'm sure each of the panelists have of this. But I do think that's, just to Nancy's point, it also allows business owners, or it results in business owners being more committed to the community, and things that your example of investing in youth workforce development or young people workforce is a perfect example of that. Because someone's born and raised and spends a lot of time in the North Metro, they're committed to that location. And I do see the business climate there unique in that way as well. And then finally, I think the third theme I heard was land availability, right? And affordable land. And so while that's always a moving target, I think that's one thing that I heard the panelists really call out as unique to North Metro. A lot of other areas, the land is either very high cost or gobbled up by speculators already. And so I do think you see things both on the public land, like the EDAs and the city councils investing in land to then plat and resell, or just the private market. So those are things that I heard you say, things that I've seen too over the years that really make North Metro unique. All right, let's talk a little bit about housing, Trevor. What are the things you're seeing in housing, and particularly recently, and then what is the look ahead for housing as we move forward in the next year or two?
Yeah, so first example I'll give is in Coon Rapids. So Lyra is a project that Sherman developed that opened up right at the beginning of COVID. And I think that, our leasing team and our company was at a little bit of dismay because we were, not sure what the leasing world was going to look like as we were fully transitioning to everything being online, and as we were not doing the same level of leasing specials or being able to physically move in with a lot of moving companies being shut down and things like that, wondering what that lease up was going to look like. We had a very surprisingly positive entrance into that market, and we were nearly fully leased up, probably got to 80-90% within 7-8 months. Those last 10% to 20% for the most expensive units in the project took a little bit longer to lease up, but probably another 6 months thereafter until we were fully occupied with all 180 units. But one thing that we did definitely see in housing is that we see a lot more diversity in our general occupancy buildings in the north suburbs than we do elsewhere. And I'm not talking about just ethnic diversity, I'm talking about income and age diversity as well. The North Metro has been pretty significantly starved for new rental housing product over the past 25, 30 years, as different development standards and cities, eyes have been more turned towards developing out their single family home areas and things of that nature. And so as we've turned back, I think that cities are seeing, and now the market has a bunch of comparables in the northern suburbs for apartment projects that are getting done. In terms of rent growth, I think that rent growth across the entirety of the Twin Cities market hasn't been overwhelmingly strong unless you're delivering in a place that had relatively little inventory to begin with. That being said, I think that the North Metro has done a slightly better job in terms of moderating costs, and has certainly done better on limiting increases in expenses. So for example, both the projects that are in the Fridley area, as well as those that are in Coon Rapids, and some of them that we've looked at in Blaine, have property taxes that are probably generally in the very high 2000s up to the low up to the high $3,000 on a per unit basis. Whereas if you were to do those same projects in a Hennepin County, Washington County, et cetera, you're probably looking at taxes that are anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000 a unit. And so those ongoing operating expenses certainly make the North Metro very attractive, not only from a land basis perspective, but also from an ongoing controllable expenses perspective.
Great. I would just add too, that really mirrors the experience we're seeing in Brooklyn Park. While it is northern Hennepin County, that we are seeing demand and actual supply meeting that demand, or at least responding to the demand, probably not coming even close to meeting it, but for multifamily housing. Brooklyn Park has not had very much new multifamily housing, which has created a huge pent-up demand, and just in the last 2 years, we've either started construction or under construction on 2 new projects, which is very exciting. But still, now that the rents have reached a level that even in a lower rent market like North Metro, you're getting good rents. I think it sounds like we'll see more of those projects coming forward to meet that demand. And one other note that I've noticed too is that the pipeline of projects, the pipeline of multifamily projects that are either entitled or have received at least preliminary financial assistance from the city is increasing significantly. And so the state stepping up to meet that demand on a LIHTC basis will continue to be more important. There are, at least in Hennepin County, I sit on a review committee for projects, and there are dozens almost 24 projects that are ready to go and just need LIHTC or housing infrastructure bonds or tax exempt bonds. So in thinking about advocacy, I think that's especially on the heels of the bajillion-dollar surplus we have, because I don't know the exact number, I can't remember from yesterday's article. It's significant. Really thinking about how we can put that into investing in multifamily housing and affordable housing, because there's projects ready to go. So I just put in my plug there, but others on the panel representing the jurisdictions, what are you noticing in housing, and do you have a specific project that you want to highlight, or anything else about housing specifically?
Yeah, we are seeing a boom in housing, but we still have a huge need for affordable housing. And we do have a couple projects, one on a redevelopment site, hopefully coming soon, a tax credit project. But our HRA EDA, we came up with we just started a housing trust fund so that we can help incent developers come to our area for affordable housing. It's really specifically for affordable housing. So we continue to try to get developments in our area. We know the further north you go, it's harder to get the rents. And so that sometimes makes it difficult for us to attract affordable housing. We've done some comparisons even just across the road basically to Forest Lake, and it's tougher to get those rents. But I think the need is there so much that people are starting to take notice and considering projects in our area. Somebody had mentioned that we need the state and the federal government to step up, and I truly believe that as well. That's what we need to make this happen. Our housing trust fund is a great help, the support, but we really need more funding than that.
Yeah, similar sentiment as everybody up here and previous, that, especially in Anoka County with a lot of third-party distribution, logistics, manufacturing, service industry, that we're trying to wrap our head around, what's the income-aligned housing level, and how do we make new construction and new units be able to try and fit within that. So I know the word affordable certainly carries a lot of weight, and so we really just try and focus on what's actually attainable for the jobs that we have available within our area, and a lot of that is education, and then taking 18 billion you're welcome. Seeing if we can, because the super RFP process, as mentioned before, is just atrociously competitive, and I've heard from
arduous.
Right. And so, I mean, if you just think from a private developer standpoint, to have to go through that process 3 years in a row and all the staff time and expense associated with that, with no return on that, I mean, all of that overhead carries into your future projects, and is negatively impacting, what those rent levels need to be on the ones that do get approved. And so, I heard from other developers in conversations I've had that really at this point with interest rates, construction market, that housing projects really can't happen without some level of public subsidy, whether it's, through the trust fund or TIF or abatement or, something along those lines. I know there's certainly exceptions in prime areas where you get the grocery and fitness center, really focused trifecta that was mentioned, but for the most part, it's a really competitive market, but it's hurting business attraction and existing industry, and so it's important, from an economic development standpoint, that we all put a lot of focus and just do what we can, even if it's not the total answer.
I have an off-the-cuff question, and this one might be good for Brent. Is anyone doing single-family housing?
Sure. No, and I will mention that, or was going to mention that. We're doing anywhere between 100 and 140 per year, and that's been a pretty consistent number for the last decade or so. Our single-family platted lot inventory is being absorbed. We have two, in particular, large plots of land that combined would bring about 1,200 new single-family lots online, certainly in phases. Two different developments of about 600 each. So that would be one that we continue to see as a great opportunity in Elk River for single-family growth. I want to mention too, on our multifamily side, we've had again, over the last 10 years or so, a period where we have not done much at all with multifamily. But in the last 2 to 3 years now have seen a lot more. We had the Saxon Auto dealership that was an abandoned site for about 10 years. Finally, through a tax incentive, we're able to help a developer acquire that, and they'll be putting 2 80-unit buildings there. So that'll be our first bigger market rate apartment in several years. We did just do a affordable project, and we're looking at another affordable project. Those both are meeting a good need in our community. We also have Guardian Angels in our community, which is a huge retirement community. So there is some of the 55 plus type residential development that we look at as well. We have one that's been approved to provide more senior apartments in Elk River as well.
Where is that single-family neighborhood and who is the developer?
The 2 large ones would both be on the east side. One, we call it the Speck property, owned by the Speck family. It's very visible if you're on the Highway 10 169 corridor, kind of as you're exiting Ramsey into Elk River. It's very rural-like. It's former farmland. That would be one. And then just to the north of that is another couple 100-acre site.
Anything else on single family? Well,
Yeah, actually, so one trend that I've kind of been surprised hasn't made it to the North Metro yet is single-family rental, because we've been seeing single-family rental as a pretty big trend nationally, and it's, we're seeing some of the first projects being delivered here in the Metro, but they haven't yet made it to the northern suburbs, and I've been interested by that, particularly because the northern suburbs have a fair amount of low land basis and large area sites that would be amenable that are still within a very reasonable commute shed, the same way that a number of these other sites and some of the other communities have been as well.
I just had a conversation last week about that. I had not heard that was a trend. And is it Beacon Ridge? Does anybody know about that project? I think there is one in Maple Grove, maybe.
Okay.
Called Beacon Ridge or something like that. And it was, I don't know if it's Maple Grove, but maybe it's Rogers. I can't remember. But yeah, that is an interesting emerging trend that I do think, if it hits the Twin Cities, will start in the far north market, like Rogers, Monticello, on that 94 corridor in particularly, but possibly Highway 10, 169 as well, which again highlights the extreme demand for rental housing when we can build single family neighborhoods as rentals. That's quite intriguing to me. I will just say Brooklyn Park does not have any single family developments, and it's something we know is an issue, but I'm interested in seeing over time how single family neighborhoods adapt and change to accommodate that high land basis through density or smaller units, or even slab on grade single family housing. So have any of you seen any kind of adaptations in the single family housing market to accommodate increased construction costs, smaller lots or slab on grade or smaller houses?
I saw one developer, I can't remember exactly who it was, but I saw one developer that was doing more or less prefab ADUs within their single family homes. And so you were getting the ability to immediately put a renter in that community, and it was part of that particular HOA's bylaws, and the city approved it to allow for that ADU within the single family home. The concept was substantially similar to duplexes previously, except that the ADU was really made for a single or potentially a couple, certainly not a family within this ADU, but it significantly would subsidize their mortgage payments and make things a lot more attainable.
You see middle, I love it. Anybody else, any final thoughts on housing before we move to our last question?
You mentioned the lot size reduction, and that's one that we've been asked to look at in particular on those 2 large unplatted properties yet. And that's been a unique dialogue, because certainly understand the benefit financially of doing that. But in our case, we're a very rural community. We still have a lot of 2.5 acre lots. and some of more dense areas are still fairly large lots as well. So to go to something that's, less than 65 feet maybe changes the character of the community. And so there's an ongoing dialogue about that and to what degree in any development, what percentage would be allowed to do something like that.
That sounds familiar from my Ramsey days and having to drive, having the larger lot owners having to drive past the small lots and just sort of with disdain every day makes it politically difficult to reduce lot sizes when they've seen examples of it and maybe don't like it as well. All right, the last question is, what should this audience be preparing for in the next 1 to 2 years, forward-looking in the North Metro market if they come to your communities or your counties or to your development team? What should they be preparing for? Trevor, do you want to start?
Sure, we'll get the doomcaster out of the way. Rising interest rates over the next year are going to make things quite difficult. Everyone is expecting at least another 50 basis point rise in interest rates at the federal level to come here at the next meeting, and we're probably going to be seeing SOFR, which is the base index rate for most construction financing, probably top out around 5% or so, and that's going to stay that way, where it's projected in most of the forward rate curves for about the next 18 months or so. It will likely come down maybe in the fourth quarter of next year, but it's going to be coming down at 25 basis points or so at a time. It's not going to go down anywhere near as quickly as it came up, which means that there is going to be a significant adjustment in terms of development patterns, in terms of ask for subsidy, because that ripple effect is very strong. So for example, in TIF, if you're looking at doing tax increment financing in a really large project, what would have generated, call it $6 million in TIF a year ago, will probably only generate $4.5 million in TIF moving forward, because that increase in interest rates reduces the value of that long-term cash flow for any lenders that are willing to provide on it. I know this is a little bit dense, but what that essentially means is that what has been the primary tool for housing and infrastructure development is going to become less of a tool as interest rates and as the market becomes more challenged. It's yet to be seen how this is going to be, how the demand for housing and for other forms of construction are going to weigh in on the general supply chain, and if that's going to loosen up to make it so that industrial timelines don't exceed 12, 14 plus months for structural steel or precast in the apartment buildings, and maybe that gets a little bit better. Maybe some forms of rates will go down a little bit, maybe on the construction side, but that's certainly something that hasn't been visible yet. Construction costs have gone up pretty tremendously since about 2013, 14, 15, when just on the multifamily side you could build a reasonable project in a suburb for probably something in the range of $125,000 a unit is now $225,000 a unit. And while there certainly has been some level of appreciable rent growth since the 2013, 14, 15 era, rents certainly have not doubled at the same time that interest rates and construction costs have gone down. And so developers' yields have certainly compressed over that time, but in a time of rapid inflation, I don't see those yields compressing much further. I certainly think that there will be some level of downturn, and that it will be the projects that are the highest priority for the cities moving forward are the projects that will get done. And when I say highest priority, I mean willingness to put their money where their mouth is.
Thank you for highlighting that. We have like 3 requests for reconsideration of our financial packages. So that is consistent with what we're seeing. Brent, what's on the horizon in Elk River in particular?
Yeah, I already mentioned the Highway 169, we call it the Highway 169 Redefine project. That will really transform our community, and like the project in Anoka, and none of us mentioned the North Star corridor, the commuter rail, but I think transportation will be a huge factor that changes the dynamic quite a bit in the North Metro, or particularly Northwest Metro. Again, easier access. I think we'll see a lot of change too in people's commuting patterns. I would like to say we'll probably see increased volumes, but also shorter commute times or travel times, just because the infrastructure is so much better in that area. I think that's going to be really appealing on the retail front for better access. It's also going to be really good for industries and distributors that want to get to the main highway network faster and easier, and maybe are willing to look a little bit farther outside of the traditional corridors.
And then Anoka County as a whole.
Yeah. I think we're going to see, some continued industrial investment. Recent numbers, 2.3% vacancy on the industrial side of it. So there's still, I know that there's increased costs in a lot of things, but there's people that are in the market that are going to need to grow and are looking to grow and are willing to make that investment, which is then going to free up some capacity and allow for some more affordable backfilling. There's, with the robust industrial growth that we have seen, I think over the next couple of years, we're going to be seeing some interesting policy decisions on the local level, getting into those next growth phases, especially, as you continue a little bit further north and there's some land that's available. There's, properties that are currently agricultural that long-term phasing are going to be, developable that aren't on the market yet, but those are going to start to pop up. And so you're going to, I think it's going to be important for developers to, be in contact with the local cities or at the county level to be able to kind of, learn and know where is that next parcel going to jump on the market and what's it zoned for, and those opportunities that aren't presently, available, and being able to take advantage of that. We're seeing Centerville doing a big downtown redevelopment project. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on infrastructure extensions at the local level. Lino Lakes is doing some pre-planning to open up some land, just on roads and utilities and that kind of thing. So I think there'll be a lot of public investment to be able to create that additional opportunity and try and bring some of those costs down. We're seeing a little bit of industrial infill as well. In those more suburban areas, you have buildings that were constructed in the 70s, 80s, 90s that still have useful life for the structure, but the kind of the zoning standards and approaches were these, very large properties and seas of parking that now investors are buying up, and they're like, hey, actually we can fit another 50,000 square foot building here, or big retail areas that, again, with a shift to online shopping, just, less vehicles. Municipalities that are changing their parking regulations to be able to allow for the creation of new retail pads, that kind of thing. So I think that we're going to be seeing a lot more business-friendly, higher density kind of moves at the local level, which is going to create opportunities that don't exist right now.
And then finally, Nancy, what's on the horizon in Chisago County?
We're hearing a lot more from industrial users that need rail, and we do have a few sites with spurs that are available now with a couple closings. So we're hearing more about that, and we do have our North Branch and our Rush City Industrial Park right on the rail, and work that's been done designing some spurs. So we do have that available, and the more we're hearing, I'm thinking that we're going to be seeing some of that move in the next year or two. But on the transportation side, Highway 8, which cuts from Wyoming over to Wisconsin, a lot of people think of it as their route to their cabin in Wisconsin. I hear that a lot. That has been a poor highway. They sometimes call it the highway of death, which I hate to say, but MnDOT was going to just do a reconstruction job, just overlay basically. And the county really wanted to see that improve because of the safety primarily. And so the Chisago County Public Works Director designed new plans for that. The primary area will be Wyoming to Chisago City, but it will affect the remainder of Highway 8. And so we recently, all the cities got together and we put together a strategic framework of that area, looking at what would the land uses best be used by this reconstruction project, so that we could get ahead of development, understand what would work there, and not have development start popping in, and then we have to deal with it. So we're really trying to look ahead. That's even turned into now looking at, there's a regional trail, the Swedish trail, Swedish Immigrant Trail, that is started down by Taylor's Falls and through Schaefer, and then there's gaps along the way. We're looking at that all together, trying to even get that completed. And then the safety issue for pedestrians, looking at how do you get across Highway 8 in those busy areas. So I really think that will be huge for development in that part of the county, and I'm so happy to be looking at it ahead of the game.
All right, well, thank you so much for your insight and wisdom and participation on this panel. I don't know if we have time for questions. I don't think we do. So please join me in thanking our panelists today.
Well, we all know we're the last group to get your 4 credits. So if we could speed this hour up, we would, but I promise you it's going to be an exciting event. One more hour, we can let Bob Johnson go home and take his nap. Just kidding, Bob. Had to throw it at you. But no, we are really excited to be here. Our group, we're here to talk about the West Suburban. I'm going to let these folks introduce themselves, but I'm thrilled that we truly do have a really good group here. We have somebody from Maple Grove City, which is probably one of the most progressive cities. We have Laura Moore, who's running around with one of the biggest tenant rep assignments in the market today. Dan Linnell, who's selling apartments all over town. Mike Selwyn, who has done about everything in his career. I don't think we could stump him. And then we have just some kid over there with some good DNA. But I want them to introduce themselves. So why don't we start with that, but I'm going to throw you a curveball right off the bat. How'd you get into business?
That's a good question. My name is Brett Angel. I'm the Assistant Community and Economic Development Director for the City of Maple Grove. I've been with Maple Grove for about 3 years now. I've worked in community development for the past 10 years in various parts of the metro, so South Metro, North Metro, and now West Metro. So it's cool to see what other cities are doing. What got me into community development, I started my career as a planner. So I spent the first 5 years as a planner, the last 5 working more on the economic development side. It's not one that I would have known about, except I have a cousin who is a community development director in Arizona. So learning from him, always having an interest in geography and the build out, how cities build out, led me into this career.
Did you have anything to do with the state champion football team last week? Huh?
I forgot to mention that.
The
That
Crimson,
was on my
yeah.
list.
I mean,
Crimson,
Reds
6A
just went up.
champions.
Reds went up in Maple Grove. Just for 1 extra credit hour bonus, what is a crimson? A color. Get your credit from Jeff. Okay. Good luck. Good luck. Okay, Laura.
Hi there, Laura Moore, Vice President of Real Estate for Colliers. So sorry, I'm getting tripped up. So office brokerage, representing office users. Been with Colliers over 3 years. I've been in the industry over 20 years. I've had the honor of representing a lot of businesses throughout the Twin Cities. Predominantly, that's what I've done throughout my career. I'm on a team with 4 other brokers, Kevin O'Neill, Mike Gelfman, Nate Carrick. Currently, we are working on identifying corporate relocation sites, and really working through a lot of the analysis that comes with that in terms of, how does hybrid work today? What is the right location? What, from a culture standpoint, what is necessary to make the office a place you get to go to? So it's a lot of fun. It's, okay, there you go.
That was mean. And so was the start. So I'm Connor McCarthy, and yeah, the moderator is my dad. And I'm a vice president of development at United Properties. I manage our industrial development practice here in the state of Minnesota. And I've been in the business for 7 years now, entirely with United Properties out of college. And what got me into the business, you were probably some sort of role model in that sense. When I was at the University of St. Thomas, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to major in, but real estate studies was on the list, and I thought it sounded great. So I took some classes, and here I am 10 years later. So that's my answer.
Good morning, everyone.
My name is Dan Linnell. I work on the JLL Capital Markets team, specializing in multifamily investment sales. Our team also works on debt and equity assignments. My claim to fame for getting into the industry was I got in at a really hot time, which was 2009. I had a degree from St. Cloud State. I received a job or a position unpaid working for a developer in Wayzata. And when the developer that I was working for got laid off, I was laid off my unpaid internship. So I truly felt the value early on in my career for my role in this industry, but grateful to be here today.
Dan, a correction, that's Harvard of the North, okay?
Excuse me, Harvard of the North.
Mike?
Thank you. Yeah, Mike Selman with Transwestern Managing Principal. I've been in this business for a long, long time. John, almost as long as you, I think. About 35 years, so it's been a while. So when you say I've done a lot of different things, you can't help but do a lot of different things if you're in the business that long. You trip over a lot of stuff. So I got in the business that many years ago, really by accident. Worked part-time as I was going through College of St. Thomas at the time. And I figured I'd do this until I found a real job. And I'm still looking for the real job, and in the meantime, using real estate as a hobby.
Great. Well, thanks, group. And I do want to address the elephant in the room. Jay mentioned this is the first time a father-son has been a moderator and panelist. You can already hear my voice cracking. So I was thinking, geez, do I do something? Do I bring him? I mean, I got video from when he was born. I got pictures of him. I mean, there is a lot I could do here, right? But I will tell you, Mom's probably watching if you want to wave at her. But I'm just going to say we're really proud of you and keep up the good work. So
Thank you.
That's all I'm going to say.
Thanks.
So to get this rolling, Mike, again, we're talking about the West Market. And again, we define the West Market of everything west of 35W. So it's a big area. We probably took some liberties there, but what's going on? Who's buying? Who's selling? Who's moving? Why don't we start down with you, Mike?
Yeah, I'll start, and I'm sure everybody else will have some things to add as well. You know, despite kind of an interesting office market, and I primarily focus on office product and industrial. I really do it throughout the Twin Cities. Office, there is some things. There are some things moving in the office market. Believe it or not, again, some of the biggest assets in the Twin Cities have been sold and are in play currently. First off, Normandale Lakes happened earlier this year, 1.7 million square feet. That sold for, I think it was about $275 a foot or thereabouts. So, you know, a nice sale. It actually was a bit less expensive. In fact, I think it was $265 a foot. Sold for $2 a foot, cheaper than it had sold 3 years prior. But nonetheless, big asset sale. MetLife and Allstate sold that to a group out of New York called Opal syndication, a company that syndicates its money and again buys assets like Normandale Lake. So that was an interesting one. Kind of came out of the blue. I don't think the property's on the market actively, and Opal again came through and bought that. A big sale just recently happening, 10 West End. Bridge Investments had bought that for about $351 a foot, which was a big number. So Normandale Lakes, which used to be kind of the creme de la creme out in the suburbs, about $265. Well, the $351 a foot sort of hit a new high for 10 West End, which is the new office building that Ryan and Sotera built right at 100 and 394 right in the West End. Excelsior Crossings was also bought by Bridge earlier in the year. That was a smaller than I guess Normandale Lakes, but about 500,000 square feet. Bridge bought that, and again is assembling quite a portfolio here in the Twin Cities. I think that brings them to about between that West End Office Center and 10 West End. Yeah, that brings them to about 1.4 million.
We're going to come back to a couple of those other ones, but Dan, talk about the multifamily market going on in the West.
So obviously the West Metro has been very active from a multifamily sales standpoint. Our team year to date has sold about 450 million worth of multifamily, not including debt and equity. And if you just look at the portion of that was in the West Metro, it's about half. So one of the transactions opportunity to work on was the sale of Rush Creek Apartments. It's about a $75 million transaction, brand new project. The building was in lease up when we sold it. There was a family, the Bellegarde family, that had some significant holdings that they had built almost 40 years ago. And they were looking to trade out of those assets that had CapEx and focus on taking the kind of the legacy family into the next generation with brand new assets. So they sold the property in Ridgedale for about 126 million. They sold the property in Fridley, and they traded the asset in Fridley into this brand new project in Maple Grove, Rush Creek Apartments, as well as one down in Lakeville. So those are some of the major transactions on the multifamily front.
So I'm gonna add on to that question. So we saw an article in the paper, I think a week ago, that there's 1,400 businesses that moved out of downtown Minneapolis. Is there a democratic shift? Yeah, that has happened already. Is there a demographic shift happening? Are people coming out to the west from downtown? Can anybody address that? Is it equally going to other markets, or is the west benefiting more from what's happening downtown?
Yeah, I can speak specifically to Maple Grove. We're an amenity-rich community, so we have a high amount of retail, high number of parks. Obviously, our school district is really good in sports, not just football, also hockey. So that has led to a shift. We are slowly becoming younger. So many cities have traditionally been constantly aging. We have over 2,000 units of housing that are either have been approved or in the process of construction. So there's plenty of opportunities for new families to come into the metro. And then there's also what's been talked about so often over the past couple of years of a changing diversity of the suburbs. And we've seen that significantly over the past 20 years. We were at 2000, we were approximately 92% white only for our population, and now that's shifted to in the 70s%, and that's going to continue to shift. So we are seeing that change. I don't know specifically if they're coming from Minneapolis. I would say that we've seen quite a few businesses leave Minneapolis, as that article mentioned, the 1,400 that have since located in Maple Grove. But in terms of population, I would say the school district is something that is helping us.
Laura, anything on the user front?
So just to elaborate a little bit about that 1,400, I think a lot of that is associated with independent contractors. So it's not necessarily 1,400 businesses. I actually reached out to that author of that article just to get a little clarity. But I do think that it's just the sprawl. I mean, people are choosing hybrid more often. So, they're going to go into the office less often, 1 to 2 times, maybe 3 times a week. That's the average. So that is going to allow someone to be further out in a second ring community.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? Mike, you wanted something?
Yeah, I can just speak anecdotally to that in that, we leased out 10 West End, which has been one of the more popular office buildings just outside of downtown. We didn't see we saw a lot of activity looking at that building. Not a lot of leasing, not a lot of people actually picking up and moving from downtown to West End. I think that'll happen here over the next couple of years as leases expire. But again, most of the movement has been smaller companies, no real large entities as yet. But we'll see some of that in the next 12 to 18 months for sure.
I don't know if this was going to be one of your predictions, but is 20 West End, is that?
That is planned, and we hope to get that kicked off here sometime in the next 12 months.
What kind of rates are you quoting for that on a gross basis?
We're not quite there yet, but it'll be mid to high 30s, and we were achieving that at the 10 West End at the end as well. So people aren't afraid to pay rents for the right buildings.
That's a bargain. Well, that's what we're hearing, right? So before we leave activity, Laura, I always think of the Carlson Towers as kind of the high water mark over the years has been, right? Now, since we've had Colonnade and a few other Class A's, but I always drive by the Carlson Towers and just kind of admire them. So what's happening out there?
Well, they've updated a lot of the amenities at 701. I mean, it's gorgeous. They've dumped millions of dollars into all the common areas.
That's the building that Radis, or who moved out of that? The Carlson moved out of.
That is correct. That's
Okay.
where Radisson moved out of. I believe the Carlson family still has an interest in that office property. So, you know, it's still a beautiful property, and I think people choose to be in that building because the association with the buildings. I mean, it is, you know, a profile play, right? I mean, it's a very beautiful building. I will say, I think that there are options along 394. I think 10 West End has opened up those options. However, someone that might have already been at 701 and 601 may not want to go that far east. I think sometimes that's a challenge. That's sometimes a barrier. I don't know if that is.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
So where should people invest in the West?
Industrial.
Where?
I think it's very broad. I mean, in this market cycle, in this past market cycle, and I wouldn't even say we're still in this past market cycle, but it's been really metro-wide, but we've seen a lot of transactions in the Northwest. There's been a lot of leasing in the Northwest for industrial space, a lot of sales, Brooklyn Park, Maple Grove, and others. Shakopee is also in the West Metro and the Southwest. So it's been geographically spread, but as a product type, I think industrial's been very active in the user and investor space. So I'm not an expert in office real estate by any means, but I do think there's a lot of interesting things that have been happening in the West Metro. I heard yesterday somebody was bold enough to say they think we have 30% too much office space nationwide as a country. And so to see what that might impact, there's been some foreclosures and keys being given back to the bank throughout the metro area. I think there's just a lot that we'll learn, and it's cool to see that projects like 10 West End and 20 West End are going to continue to succeed. I think West End is a fantastic case study for what you know, urban suburban real estate might look like in the future in micro markets like that.
I would just add on the multifamily front. So if you look at Minnetonka, Plymouth, Eden Prairie, Shakopee, Maple Grove, and Rogers, the organic rent growth just this year was 5 to 6%, which is somewhat conservative based on what we were hearing across the nation over the last 24 months. But for the Twin Cities, that's strong, especially since we've experienced some economic headwinds this year. So those are areas that are kind of obvious if you can find sites to develop multifamily or redevelop multifamily. So I think that those are the obvious opportunities. And then there's other opportunities within the West Metro. We've worked on projects in the 610 corridor of Brooklyn Park, which with that connection, obviously just was kind of flyover before it was connected to Interstate 94. So there's opportunities there. We're working with a developer on a site in Hopkins. So there's opportunities there when your interests are aligned with the cities.
Yeah, good. I want to ask a question that kind of came up in the last panel. It dealt with single-family rentals, and it is a new trend nationally. It kind of came up over the last couple of years. And it came up in our prep call, and Brett had some interesting things that are happening in Maple Grove. You want to elaborate a little bit, Brett, what's happening with single-family rentals in Maple Grove?
Sure, so Brian kind of hit on this point. Maple Grove does have single-family rental communities. We have Mills Creek, which is single-family, Avery Park, which is a mix of townhomes and single-family, and then Summerwell, which will be townhomes when it's completed. But as we're looking at the rental programs within Maple Grove, about last April, the city council passed a 1-year moratorium on all new single-family rental properties. And this extends past single-family to include townhomes. This would be anything with a direct access to the outdoors. And this is really this trend of these single-family rental communities coming in. It's creating a strain on our rental housing programs of what we have. We have a small capacity, and with the 1,000+ units of multifamily also being added, the city council wanted to take a step back and actually address, do we need to add staff to be able to handle this new trend of what we're seeing? So it is something, we have a 1-year moratorium that's maximum that cities can do with state statute. So at the end of the moratorium, we'll likely be adding a few different staff members. multifamily is gonna shift their inspections over to the fire department because they're in those buildings every year, so we've kind of been doubling up on that. But we also want to ensure over this past year, we've seen a lot of these large national corporations come in and buy out all the homes that were for sale, and these are the one-off homes throughout the neighborhood. And so that was taking away home ownership opportunities, and that's a way for so many people to build wealth. So we really want to take a look at what cities can do to address these large national corporations coming in and buying out all the inventory within the city.
Yeah, that can raise prices in the community and just exasperates our problem. So what does a renter pay a month to rent one of those homes? I'm just curious, just roughly.
From what I've seen, it's typically $400 to $500 more than what a mortgage payment would be.
So you're doing it for convenience?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is not the new construction one, so it's gonna extend even higher.
I can touch on that. So Beacon Ridge, for example, when they hit the market, they're kind of establishing a new norm. So you saw rents in the low $3,000 range. I know there was so much demand there that they were able to push the rents. JLL actually provided the financing on that project, stabilized financing. So that project did extremely well, as did Mill Creek. So the demand's definitely there, which brings up another interesting topic, which is what is a single family mortgage payment today? If you were buying a house last year and you bought a $500,000 house, which is the average we heard earlier in Rosemount, and you take out a $400,000 mortgage, if you have that kind of down payment, your payment was $2,500 last year. Well, this year it's at least $3,500. So you're kind of in line with that. And I think these single family home developments, to the developer's credit, are risky and they're more expensive because they're smaller houses, but you're building full-size houses. So they're obviously taking advantage of that.
Dan, what's the exit on this? Is there an appetite for investors to buy those?
So the Mill Creek project was actually bought out by their investment partner. So PCCP bought out the developer on the Maple Grove project kind of in the middle of the pandemic. But there's a market out there, but it's definitely not one that's as easily tracked, at least in Minnesota, as it is in other markets. So there's an exit. Lenders are still trying to understand it, but the agency lenders will lean into it, which helps create liquidity for those developers.
And PCCP will hold on to that for a long time. Plan is
Yep.
Mike, that's a good question. What's the exit when you have 240, I guess, identical homes? Who's going to buy that? And I heard last year the reason the institutions, the Blackstones and the bigger groups were looking at them was because it lowered their risk on the exit, right? You didn't have to just sell the entire 240. If the market told you that, you know what, let's sell these individually to the homeowners, and it gives them a different tax as well, so they don't get hit by big capital gains. They can do them individually. So I think we're going to see more of them. Obviously, maybe not Maple Grove until 2025, but we'll be okay. Let's change gears here to some unique projects going on in the West. One that I run into every day, I'm still scratching my head a little bit. I live in Eden Prairie. Is the Southwest Light Rail. It goes from downtown, kind of winds through a bunch of areas and comes to Eden Prairie and does some more winding around. Not sure where it really goes and ends up. But I think initially it was going to be about 1.5 million. I think they're up to 2.7. We were supposed to be riding it today, and I don't think it's ready till 2027 now. So how is the Southwest Light Rail affecting your business? How are people talking about it? Are they getting excited? Are they wondering? Anybody have any comment on the Southwest Light Rail?
I can touch on the multifamily front. So I can name 5 stops where there's probably an average of 1,000 new housing units, multifamily going in. So travel outside of downtown Minneapolis, you stop at the West Lake Street stop. There's Waterbury Apartments, there's the Mez at West Lake Quarter. Those are both projects that Bader's working on. That's in addition to all the other hundreds of units that have already been developed in that area. You travel down to the Beltline Station stop where Trevor's got Sherman's project. I think that's multi-phase. It'll be 400 units when that's said and done. South of there, you've got Roars, Opus building their projects. You go down to the Blake Road stop. You've got Lattice's multi-phase project with a tower across the street from that. You've got Trilogy's project.
You head down into South Opus Park, there's over 1,000 units under construction already. And then you end at the Southwest Light Rail Station, and you've got Elevated Southwest Station, which is a Timberland project. They're building a project we had an opportunity to work with them on down the street called Paravel Apartments, because the Elevate was such a success story. For this panel, I decided to actually drive from my office downtown Minneapolis and try and follow the light rail line, because I too only saw bits and pieces of it. It was quite interesting. It looks a lot more complete when you're down in Eden Prairie versus when I'm downtown Minneapolis.
Yeah. And I've always wondered, in fact, I've asked people at the city along the way, I said, now, is this gonna be, this is elaborate track you're building. I presume all the wires are gonna be in the track, right? And they're like, don't know. Well, now if you drive through Eden Prairie, you see all the metal poles going up. And it's gonna look like a wire city. I mean, it's gonna look like one of those Eastern Indian towns where they're trying to get wires, phone systems working and stuff like that. We've all seen that picture. I'm not sure people really were aware of that or know that, because it's gonna look different in communities that have this light rail go through it. And we'll see, can't wait to ride it someday.
I'd say from an office perspective, by the way, that there's not going to be much impact there. I think there's some beneficiaries. Excelsior Crossing, for instance, is right across the street from the light rail station. I think that'll be a great benefit for them, but no new development will be initiated because of that.
I would agree. I would say also, I think businesses, well, I think once the rail is complete, I think Minneapolis is going to be a benefactor more than any of the other suburbs. So that'll be interesting to follow.
Sure.
But businesses to date aren't saying, I need to be located close to the rail. It's the multifamily that's benefiting.
Yeah, and it's the multifamily development that's spurred with the light rail, but infrastructure improvements in general, I think, are very impactful for development. And in the industrial focus world that I live in, the Highway 610 extension that Dan mentioned earlier really spurred a lot of that activity in Brooklyn Park and in the Northwest. And then before my time, and Jason and I were talking about this before, is the Bloomington Ferry Bridge and the extension down in the southwest of Shakopee, and the industrial development that grew and grew in the 90s and continues to be built out to the point where Shakopee is expanding its borders to have more industrial zone land. So infrastructure improvements do spur development, and the light rail is an example of that for multifamily.
Yeah, that's good. Intelligent, that's really smart stuff.
Yeah, thanks.
That's awesome. Dan, I wanted to ask you, have you done any studies are these developers able to achieve a higher rent when you're close to transit?
I think we're early on truly knowing, but it's obviously an amenity that nobody else can offer unless you're looking at the East Metro as an example. But whether people utilize it or not, I think people like to have the access to it, or at least the perception of it. So I think the projects will do really well.
Yeah, and I think you have to remember, I think when we think light rail and subways in Europe and how easy it is to get around, I mean, those took 300, 400, 500 years to get fully developed. And so we're on the Zephyr for another 20 years, I think, is the way to look at it, right? Okay, the Zephyr is a little slow moving train from somewhere to Stillwater, I think.
You're dating yourself.
Yeah. Aging myself. Yeah. Okay. Also, to me, it feels like the first in suburbs, they're kind of fully built out. There's not a lot of land that's really obvious for development, and I'm wondering how is that affecting, and maybe not only the lack of land, but some of these cities are getting older too with some of the demographics. What's talked about in city halls regarding that? How do you prepare for that?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting trend. Maple Grove's about 85% built out. We probably have 20 years left. If you know Maple Grove, we have a huge gravel mine that's going to take the extended period. We probably have 5 years left of greenfield development. We really blew up in the late 80s, early 90s, so we're not that old of a community. Most of our buildings haven't hit that full obsolescence point yet. But what we have been seeing as the areas, especially in Arbor Lakes, as new lots have not been available, they've been looking at parking lots. And I think that's something that's going to continue to see happen. A lot of outlots being developed for smaller retail uses, commercial uses. But from a city standpoint, as this change is occurring and as cities get built out, you really have to take a look at both your comprehensive plan. That's going to be extremely important to make sure that you're planning for all of these sites, as well as your infrastructure needs. Obviously, when redevelopment happens, usually it's into higher density than what was previously there. So you want to make sure that you are planning and have the funds available to handle these changes to any of the lots.
Good. You know, we're starting to see, or I believe we're starting to see some functional obsolescence. We're hearing about it in the office market. What are we going to do with some of these older buildings? Are you guys dealing with, is there any opportunities in the, when you come across something that's functionally obsolete, or do you have some examples that you're working on?
Yeah, I'm going to take that because it's an opportunity for a quick commercial on United Properties right now. But just next door here to the Golden Valley Country Club, about a 5-iron away, we've got a office building that we're in the process of demolishing. There'll be a wrecking ball on site in just a matter of weeks. It's the old Optum headquarters building that's been vacant for about 7 years. So that building will be torn down to make way for a new industrial business park of about 400,000 square feet. So I think that's an example of how built-out cities like Golden Valley can see new development. I think it's an example of how older office space that's not as occupiable can make way for newer forms of commerce and job creation and tax growth in the city. So we're really excited about that project, and hopefully the next time we're all here for another Real Estate Journal event, we'll see some more construction activity on the site.
And I'll quick advocate for my neighbor to the south of Plymouth. They have 2 sites that we have seen this with, the Prudential site and then also the Four Seasons Mall. For them, these are 2 different developments that are the largest developments they've had in an extended period of time, and probably the largest that they will have, specifically the Prudential site. And really, from Maple Grove's perspective, I'm seeing kind of the opposite end of being the benefactor from functional obsolescence of businesses from first-ring suburbs moving out to Maple Grove, where they're getting a newer product type. And also right now, the trend I've been seeing a lot of in the leasing activity for especially manufacturing is they have multiple locations throughout the metro, and now they want to co-locate it into one spot. So with the Arbor Lakes Business Park, we're about to see 110,000 square foot lease, which is that scenario where they're moving from 4 locations into 1.
Anybody want to talk about the Prudential site that was in the news recently?
Yeah, so I can piggyback off what Brett had mentioned about the Prudential site. So our industrial team, office industrial team, had an opportunity to represent Prudential in the sale of that campus. So as many of us are aware, that's a 75-acre site, or maybe you're not aware, but it's a big, expansive campus right on 169 there in Plymouth. Plymouth is one of the markets I mentioned before that's experienced really strong rent growth. So a partnership between Roars and Scannell was formed, and so they purchased that campus that Prudential wasn't occupying. Prudential moved actually into the Dayton's project downtown Minneapolis with their staff that still goes into the office every day. And then they're going to tear down that office campus where they were located for decades, and they're going to develop that into 300+ million worth of multifamily, industrial, as well as retail uses when all is said and done.
Yeah, the obsolete office buildings are absolutely getting redeveloped. And again, we've mentioned some of them over on France Avenue. Orion with Mortensen is redeveloping a former US bank building and 3-story office building. Across the street, they're doing the same with 7250 France. So again, a lot of what you're seeing on the development front from an office perspective is taking older obsolete office buildings and redeveloping them. Again, downtowns, Trevor and his group at Sherman have done a lot of that, keeping existing buildings and converting those old obsolete office buildings into residential. You'll see some of that potentially in the suburbs now. For now, however, they have been demolishing some of those old obsolete office buildings and changing them into residential or office buildings.
Yeah, and sorry, was that?
Go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say, I mean, these older office buildings, these office campuses were located in areas that were accessible and, visible for 500 to 1,000 employees. So it's in a very attractive location. And if you can find an opportunity to redevelop it into another form of real estate, it's probably a better location than anywhere you could find it that hasn't been developed. So it opens the door for potentially a higher purchase price from a land basis perspective, partnership opportunities with the current owner to help them get out of the situation that they're in. So I think that we're going to keep seeing it, and I think it's going to be really attractive for companies to be able to move their operations closer into the metro area in an industrial perspective.
So I reached out to the city of Bloomington because I just wanted to have some stats. So since 2012, they have removed 15 office properties that were obsolete, so low density type properties. And through that redevelopment, it's created 2,748 apartment units. There's been other types of redevelopments, but that's a great example of the city of Bloomington really thinking through of highest and best use. But with that, they had to think through the infrastructure because a lot of additional parking, structured parking is going to be required to allow for this kind of density. So great example.
Good, thank you. Okay, raise your hand if you ever drove by that Prudential site. God, I'd love to get on a riding lawnmower and mow that one time. Come on, huh? We all did, we all did. Okay, new topic, unless there's anything more about the redevelopment.
I was gonna mention one more deal, actually another Sherman project. So we had the opportunity to sell the Knox site for Wells Fargo, downtown Minneapolis. That was a site that if you've ever been inside it, it was kind of a concrete bunker. You walk around in there and I don't know, I'd have to get lost before I found a window. And so I can see why obviously there's no opportunity to save that building. So they're gonna tear that down, and they've proposed at least 700 units called Harmonia. So that'll be apartments eventually. So that's another, it's good to get some of that functionally obsolete office off the market and put back to use.
Yeah, good, good. Anything else? Okay. Winding down here. Bob, how you doing? Okay, good. We'll wake you up when we're done. Don't let the state know that, okay? So let's talk about what's needed in the West. You know, before we go there, I want to bring up something about Maple Grove. I'm not a big shopper. I try to avoid it as much as possible. But I was out there yesterday and was there early, and I parked kind of in the retail area there, and I was looking around. I'm like, wow, this place looks like it's full. And they look like really good names. You know, they're not second, third generation type retail tenants. And I'm wondering, why does it work so well, where in West End it's really struggled for retail? Everything else has worked. Housing, office, walkability, live, work, play, but the retail doesn't work for some reason in the West End. But they kind of look the same. And I'm wondering, what's the difference? Any ideas?
Yeah, it's interesting because you hear so much about how traditional retail is dead. And in Maple Grove, we've had a lot of traditional retail recently open. Sierra just opened, Torrid, Patina just moved to Maple Grove, and then even Spencer's Gifts, which you so used to them being in a traditional mall setting, is now moving into Maple Grove. So there's kind of been a few factors, and it's really interesting to really think back because Arbor Lakes is 20 years old. It may not seem that old, but it's hit the 20-year point. So with that, the city's trying to be really proactive in how we approach everything about Arbor Lakes. So we just did a multi-million-dollar reconstruction of our main street to ensure that that can continue to be viable. That's only got 3 vacancies. It had vacancies that were over 8 years that now have leases, which we're really excited about. But then one different item that the city has taken the approach of doing is we created our own destination marketing organization, or otherwise known as a tourism bureau. This is called Experience Maple Grove. This is funded through the lodging tax that the city collects. And really what this organization is promoting Maple Grove for what it's best known for. And really with Maple Grove, when you think about Maple Grove, it's the retail, it's commercial base, it's the athletics. So this organization is now working hand in hand with all the businesses to help promote them on a free basis and really get their name out there and get Maple Grove out there as a premier destination to go to, which, I mean, that's comparing ourselves to West End and other communities, why you should go to Maple Grove rather than those communities.
Yeah. Any?
I'll just add, I think
Laura,
a lot of it has to do with the highway system. I mean, you have 2 major highways intersecting. So from an access viewpoint, that lends itself to great retail. I mean, it's got visibility from front 94. Every retailer loves that. A lot of the retail does. And then you have great demographics. You have high incomes. So that helps as well.
That's a good point. Our access drives every development, not just retail. I mean, everything benefits from that.
It's kind of funny,
Easy,
I was
east,
lost
west,
for like
north, south.
15 minutes, just parked
Well-
where Lululemon or where, no, I'm kidding.
Well, I wonder too if it has something to do with competition. So you got Ridgedale. I mean, it feels like West End could compete with Mall of America more than Maple Grove would. So there could be a competition aspect to it too, because West End has 2 highways. But that's a good question. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, you had a pretty good answer during our prep call. What was it?
Oh.
Maybe
Well,
it was
I did.
related to something else, but go ahead.
I talked about how in the last several years, people of my age demographic have moved from different parts of town, and West End has been a place that's seen a lot of people move in. So the retail, bars specifically, bars and restaurant, nightlife has, I think, grown significantly at the West End. So those have been very busy.
Yeah, good. So what type of development is needed in the West End? Go ahead, anyone can take that.
West Metro.
West Metro, correct.
20 West End, of course.
20 West.
I do think we need more good quality office buildings again along, you name it, west side, southwest France, 494. There hasn't been, a new office building built there in about 20 years. And so you're seeing some of that planned anyhow, but I think we need more of that along France Avenue.
And you say that at a time when there's a lot of headwinds hitting the office market, but is that this flight to quality?
Absolutely, yeah. There are truly the haves and have-nots, and the well-located, high-quality office buildings are doing exceptionally well, rates higher than we've ever seen. The Class B and C, non-amenity spaces in poor neighborhoods are not. And so, again, a big dichotomy between the really nice Class A stuff and the other stuff.
Yeah, I think that's what's different this cycle is there's always been flight to qualities. There really has. But, not everybody can go to Normandale Lakes, or not everyone can go to 20 West End, right? But somebody who's going from a C to a B, that's their flight to quality. So there is hope for some of these landlords that have Class B. I also think back when I was a tenant rep guy, we'd always talk about the hierarchy of cost for a business. First it was employees, then it was rent. Now these Class A tenants don't even talk about rent. It seems like it doesn't matter. It's all about the space, the amenities, getting young people back to work. If we have to pay $60 a foot, that's fine.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the reason why that businesses are downsizing. So if a tenant is 15,000 square feet today, and tomorrow they want to be 10,000 square feet and they're paying a higher rent, they're going to net the same. So, but they're getting a higher quality office experience. And so that's how these Class A buildings are going to work today.
Right. Now getting their people back to the office, right? That's the key. I think they're having such a tough time getting people out of their kitchen. This is one way to do it. Give them a nice place to go.
Yep. So what else needs to be developed? West suburbs.
I just wanted to piggyback one more thing. We were talking about Class A buildings. I think that these future Class A buildings need to have walkable amenities, not just like amenities down the block or two. That's going to be the properties that do very well, is when they're walkable.
And that again is why it's West End and it's France Avenue, and beyond that, there's just not a lot of other great, Maple Grove someday might be a great spot for an office building or a big office building, but for now, it's West End and France Avenue.
But again, that's why the downtowns became so attractive, because everything was walkable, everyone was together, you could go, and now that's falling apart.
And downtown will be back. I think it'll be a while. I think it's we're 2 to 4 years from downtown Minneapolis, for instance, coming back, but it will be back because of the infrastructure, because of the walkable amenities. Again, people underestimate how great it is to be able to go have 10 options for lunch. For their employees instead of the shitty cafeteria food that some of these office buildings have. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think downtown, if you really put on a historical viewpoint like you did with Eastern Europe and trains and whatever you tried to do earlier, the downtown areas and core downtown areas and core markets, worldwide have been places where growth has spurred as human existence. So I think proximity, walkability, amenities, restaurants, all of that's here to stay. I think things ebb and flow with time, and I think the COVID pandemic and some safety issues hurt downtown, but the concept of things being close together is never going to go away, in my opinion.
I would just add, so as a tenant, JLL just moved from PwC office building at 7th and Hennepin to RBC Gateway right at Washington and Hennepin. And obviously that's a brand new office building. It was a deal that was struck pre-pandemic, but moving into that office space, I can tell you from our 1980s office building versus going into work at a brand new office building downtown Minneapolis, people are surprised by the energy that's in the office because everybody wants to come into that brand new space. So I think that piggybacks off the fact that how do you get employees into the office? Have a really nice space certainly helps downtown. But to answer your question, John, I think housing is needed in the West Metro. There's no question. There was an NPR study done, I believe it was since 2013, there was a demand for 70,000 homes in the West Metro, and it's only been met with 20,000 deliveries. So there's obviously a major shortage, and that's not something that's going to be filled by single family developments, especially with interest rates at almost 7%. So multifamily is going to have to help with that. There's only so many dollars for affordable housing, which is obviously a dire need as well. So that's a much bigger question, but we just need housing, period. And with interest rates for multifamily developers where they're at today and construction costs, like previous panels have touched on, it's extremely expensive and hard to get projects. Moving forward now, we're having a number of conversations with developers that are trying to decide whether or not they're going to move forward or not. Anything the cities can do to help out with TIF or incentives to get these projects moving forward is going to help fill the void versus kind of having a gap in time where just less deliveries are made.
Good. Okay, last question, and just one word answers are fine, just running down the line here. Give me one prediction for the western suburbs over the next few years that maybe we're not aware of, or stick your neck out on the line.
One word answer.
Well, it doesn't have to be one word.
I'm gonna use it. Booming. I think right now Maple Grove still has a gravel mining area. Just knowing the interest I've received, it's gonna be extremely busy here in the next 3 to 5 years.
Good. Laura?
Sprawl. I think businesses and people are gonna keep sprawling outwards from the core.
Yeah. So towns like Corcoran,
Victoria.
Victoria, those are going to become mainstream,
Yeah.
right? Laura's on the planning commission in Victoria, if you need to know that. So,
I love development. What can I say?
Yeah, same answer as Laura. Industrial for sure is going to continue to expand further west, further south, further north as demand vacancy rates are low. So sprawl and continued expansion.
It's tempting to say sprawl as well, but growth, you look at areas like Shakopee and Chaska, and the average age is 34 and 35. So the millennials are pushing outwards with their hybrid work schedules. And so I think everybody's going to continue moving further out, even if they have an office job 2 days a week, 3 days a week downtown.
Mike, before you answer, where's the second build-to-suit office building going to be built in the west?
Build a suit or
Build.
stack?
Build.
Well, 20 West End and then France Avenue. Again, the Orion Mortensen or Orion 7250 France, which are right across the street from each other.
Are you talking to prospects right now on 20 West End?
Absolutely, and a long list of them, yeah. So 10 West End is generally full, and there's several interested prospects in 20 West End. So the activity is good. Again, getting that first signed lease is the key, and we need that before we can move forward.
One final question. Connor, when are you going to get off our phone bill?
I think I Venmo'd you like 2 months straight, and then
Anyways, thank you, panel. Very, very good, very informative. There's obviously a lot going on. Let's have a couple questions. Jason.
When will developers, if ever, start to develop for themselves when will we see the other developers in their own portfolio, like the voice, like Jerry Holmes? Will it ever happen?
Yeah, Jason had a question. Early on in the years, there was a lot of developers that were building for their own account and piling up assets, like Gary Holm, and had a big event a few years ago. Now it seems like developers are building and selling fairly quick to make their money. When might it revert back to developers kind of holding on their own balance sheet?
Well, I guess my answer to that would be that it's probably because of the point in the market that we've been in where cap rates have continued to compress. So the longer you've held onto these buildings, I mean, the quicker you sell them, the more money you were able to make. So, but I don't think that that's necessarily here to stay. And it's not my own words, but I think that in the last 5 to 6 years, the industrial development world has been a get rich quick scheme, and I don't think that you can do that right now. So a lot of developers are now going to have to hold on to these assets for 2, 3, 4 plus years. And I think investment vehicles, larger investment companies have tried to churn capital faster. And with maybe that not being the case as much anymore, we'll probably see some companies start to do that model. So that's my thought on that.
Any other questions?
Touching back on the single family rental needs, are you finding that those individual cap rates kind of follow multifamily rental?
So far, indications are yes, but it's still, there's not a lot of data points, especially in the Twin Cities, for that supporting it. So far, yes, I think there's going to be certainly a portion of the market that's just not going to pursue those types of developments, maybe just because they don't understand it, but there's certainly enough that do understand it enough or are interested in it enough, so.
Great. Okay, we need one more question to qualify for, there we go.
Well, I'm wondering if I can get 4 CE credits after sitting here and listening to you for an hour.
Have you been here all morning?
Just this hour.
Oh, okay, wow, that's my sister Katie, everybody. Thanks for coming, Katie. Oh, and Karen, they snuck in. Jeff, charge them, please. Oh, we need a real question. Jason? Oh.
Of course.
For ownership exceed spec development moving forward for the next year.
Will you repeat that question?
Yeah, Jason Meyer said, will build to suit for sale exceed spec development in the next year or two for industrial? I think not this year. I think maybe 2024 we could see something like that. I think there's a lot of projects that are in the mix that are approved and that they're funded or close to being funded on a speculative basis and are going to be built. So it'll be hard to exceed that. But I think, yeah, I think in the next couple of years we could see that.
Good. Chris, you rose your hand, but since you're by yourself standing there, here's your chance. Since you're building, or you're part of the involvement building the biggest speculative industrial building ever built in the state of Minnesota, happening right now, how's it going? And on fire, prospects coming, but nothing signed yet. Okay. And that building's 1 million square feet. How many docks on it? Okay.
Do you want to say what community that industrial project's in?
It is in
Cottage
Dayton.
Grove?
Dayton.
No.
Dayton, okay.
Dayton. Dayton. Okay, if there's no more, we got another question. Oh, Chris, go ahead, ask your question, Chris.
This wasn't addressed, but Southgate, you guys talk about Southgate? When's the wrecking ball gonna hit it? What's going there?
I think the wrecking ball hit that building about 20 years ago.
So they have pulled a permit to demo the building, but there are no plans with the city at this time. I know that for a fact.
Isn't that a multifamily developer?
I think it's multifamily, the folks that own the apartments behind there.
Very likely, there's no plans being discussed with the city.
It feels multifamily, right? I mean, that's a billboard site though, right? There's another question back here.
I think it's a great multi-use site.
Okay, Jay, we good? Yeah, I think so. Okay, folks, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the day. Okay, Bob.